Ladies and gentlemen, in New York and in Buffalo, Mr. Malcolm X, representative of Mohammed Elijah, leader of the Muslim group, I guess in the United States. It's a national movement.
Elijah Muhammad.
I'm sorry.
The spiritual leader of the black Muslims in the Western Hemisphere.
How many members does he have, or followers?
I've never heard him say.
Do you have any idea?
No. Anybody who's in a position to know how many followers he has wouldn't say, and anybody who says is not in a position to know.
Let me ask you, Mr. X, why did you visit Fidel Castro this morning?
Well, you have to understand it like this. Because of the climate that has been produced by the trouble in Africa, in the Congo, in Kenya, and other places, it has caused a great deal of tension in Harlem. And based on that, some representatives from the 28th Precinct a few weeks ago visited our restaurant, and they were discussing these incidents that stemmed from this tension, and they asked us for suggestions on some of the best ways to combat it. So we suggested that they, instead of condemning the leaders of these different nationalist groups, that they get all of them together at the Amsterdam News Office, where they have the 28th Precinct Community Council at the Amsterdam News Office. I think it's once a month. So that they took this suggestion, and at this meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a sort of a working unity was brought about by the editor of the Amsterdam News and Captain Noonan of the 28th Precinct and Patrolman Sosis, who handles, I think, the public relations or something or other. So it was suggested that working with just that element wasn't sufficient, but to get that element of leaders together with the civic leaders, the business leaders, and whatnot there in Harlem. So last Friday, a meeting was held at the Amsterdam News Office, presided over by James Hicks, the editor, and Captain Noonan and Sosis, and I think Inspector Whalen was there, and Lieutenant Seeley. Plus, there was Commissioner Dumpson of the Department of Welfare, and Dr. Alfred Morrow, the ex-commissioner, and John B. King, Reverend Dempsey, the mayor on Harlem, Dr. Allen, Nathan Friedman, and Vernell Pemberton, assistants to the superintendent of districts. There was Norman Saunders from the mayor's committee was there. And
I believe you, Mr.
Well,
X.
all right.
Go ahead.
I want you to know who was there so you'll know why I was in Fidel Castro's room. Since you want to know, we'll get the details. One of the first things that was brought up at this meeting was that there were many African dignitaries being brought to America during the UN session, and that these African dignitaries would want to visit Harlem. And the 28th Precinct, or the police department, was very concerned that there wouldn't be a repetition of the incident that took place when President C.O.W.S. of Guinea was there. So they were asking for suggestions, and it was brought out that one of the primary reasons that this incident took place was because of improper representation on the committee or whatever it was that brought him there. There was just one element involved in the bringing of him there. Therefore, it left a lot of dissatisfied elements, and that those different ingredients caused a combustion of booing and so forth that was embarrassing. So it was suggested that a committee be set up. And this committee was supposed to be representative of all of the elements in Harlem. The nationalist elements, the Christian elements, the fraternal elements, the business elements, and so forth. And I was selected on that committee to be responsible for representing and welcoming any dignitary that came to Harlem. And when the meeting was breaking up, I asked Mr. Hicks about how to form the thing together, and he said, well, since your name was mentioned, you take the initiative in getting the others together. So then what night was that? Last night? Monday night. Monday night, we heard that Fidel Castro was coming to the Teresa, which was unbelievable.
He had a do bill that didn't work at the Shelburne.
Well, that's what somebody said, but I'm inclined not to go along with everything that I hear. So we went to the Teresa, and when we got there, the place was packed, jammed, right, and there was a lot of confusion and excitement. Now, I would like to state right here that one of the reasons that we were selected or the Muslims were selected to be represented on any committee that had anything to do with representing any dignitaries to Harlem, the police department recognizes the fact that out of all of the groups in Harlem, those who are the most, you can't find a better disciplined group or a more, I don't care what propaganda you say about us, you can't find a more disciplined group or a group that's more law-abiding than the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and you can't find a group that's more cooperative with law enforcement officers. And so when this jam occurred there at the Teresa, the police officials, we could never have been in the Teresa had not the police allowed us there. They put out the reporters. They put out everyone. But they allowed us to stay there because Inspector Whalen was at the meeting when this committee was set up. And since he's responsible for all of the safety of the dignitaries, I think in the 10th Division, he let the committee that was selected stay in the Teresa Hotel.
Mr. X, I believe you. I still ask the question.
I'm giving you some background. I don't intend to leave anything out because I've had sufficient...
We've only got 2 hours.
I understand.
We have other guests, Mr. X.
All right.
Democracy is one of the precepts of your organization.
It is, sir.
Free speech for everyone?
Yes, sir. But you can take... see, I came because Mr. Kirschenbaum
I've heard of him.
Told me that he wanted an objective report. And I don't think that whenever you are involved with a man as controversial as Dr. Castro and as controversial as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you don't just make statements that you don't explain, because people take them and twist them and make more out of them than what you mean.
I'm listening.
Now,
so you were at the Teresa.
So we left. After they had brought Dr. Castro in, we left. And then we received a call at our restaurant at 116th and Lenox. I got to get that plug in. Best restaurant in New York.
You'll pay for that, pal.
And they asked us to come to the Teresa Hotel that Dr. Castro wanted to see us. I was shocked.
Yeah.
And but we got the committee together and went back. When we went back with the Muslims, the police let us through their lines.
Right.
We were led by them up to the 9th floor and into Dr. Castro's room. And he greeted us very cordially. And he greeted us very cordially. We sat down. The room wasn't so big, and in fact, it was crowded with his entourage. And we were allowed to take in, I think, about 5: 2 Negro reporters, and a cameraman, and 4 of the brothers. And so that was that.
Mr. X, I really wanted to ask a very simple question. Doesn't Mr. Muhammad, your leader, talk about the battle between the black and the white, and isn't this the basis of his entire platform?
He teaches us that God is going to destroy the wicked. Now, who are the wicked? All you have to do is look around on this earth and find out who it is has committed the acts of a wicked man. Who is the thief? Who is the robber? Who is the enslaver? Who is the lyncher? Who is the colonizer? Now, if I point to a man and say he's a colonizer, or he's a lyncher, which is a murderer, or he's an enslaver, that doesn't mean I'm teaching hate, unless I am saying that man has done something that he hasn't done. And what Mr. Muhammad teaches us basically is that God is going to destroy the wicked. Now, nobody has to worry about that except those who are guilty of having done wickedness.
Does that include the Congolese troops as well?
How do you mean?
Well, the wicked, those who have committed murder, rape, arson, assault.
I'm surprised how a white man who knows the history of the Belgian Congo or of the Congo...
No, we're talking about wicked people.
Yes, I'm surprised that you, as a white man and as an intelligent person who knows the history of Belgian colonialization in the Congo and what they did, and I regret to say, Mr. Gray...
Well, they did bad things, too. And we're talking about the wicked without regard for race.
If you can put a man in the electric chair for crimes that he has committed, and you murder him for the murder that he has done, then you're not wicked for giving him justice or repaying him in a just way for what he has done.
Well, justice means also includes the words due process. And there's nothing due process about the marauding troops of the...
Justice is to balance the scale.
Due process, sir, is the words that have been used since the beginning of Anglo-Saxon justice.
Mr. Gray,
yes.
I think you'll find that the Belgians murdered millions and millions and millions of Congolese.
All Belgians.
Well, when I say Belgian, those who were in power over them, plus
you mean women with 5 children conducted the murdering, or they just paid for the crime?
I was at an interview where reporters asked Mr. Wigger Mary, who the Congolese government had designated to look into this so-called atrocities by the Congolese troops, and he claimed that he didn't see any signs of it.
Well, that happens to be a flat untruth.
Yes. But
the reports from all observers,
yes,
including Mr. Lumumba,
yes,
have been fairly well authenticated.
They're reaping what they sowed. Whatever happened
the women with 5 children.
What happened to the Belgians in the Congo, sir? They reaped what they sowed. A man cannot do he can't reap other than what he sowed. It didn't happen to the English. The same thing didn't happen to the English when they withdrew from places they had colonized and didn't commit atrocities. And it didn't happen to any colonial power that withdrew and did not commit these atrocities.
You think then that the Congolese troops were exactly correct in their attitude?
I'm not certain of what the attitude was because I wasn't there. And
what do you think of Patrice Lumumba, from what you've read? You think he's a wise statesman?
Well, I will say that he is one person who has brought unity among all of the colonial powers in that they all dislike him. They all united against him.
It also seems that the Russians dumped him today, too.
Well, I see, all of that's politics, which I don't follow too closely, being a religious man.
I can tell.
But at the same time, I'm interested in the betterment and the elevation of the black man. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a religious leader and a religious teacher who's not interested in politics.
Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. The worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T, Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, January 16th, 2025. So I have been told. Our weekly installment, fourth session on Dr. Maya Angelou's The Heart of a Woman. We are picking up on chapter 8. I really don't have anything to say for us to get cracking this week. I love it when I can set the audio up where there's nothing to say. We heard Minister Malcolm X from Springtime 1960 speaking with Barry Gray, suspected racist. They had about, we'll call it a 50-minute interview. We heard a little less than 15 minutes that are specific to where we left off at last week, Castro's visit to New York. He met with Malcolm X. You got to hear Malcolm X explaining how all that came together, and then that being linked with what is going on in the Congo. I said when we were reading Andrée Blouin's book that Minister Malcolm X spent so much time talking about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and white supremacy racism in the Congo in general. There you have another illustration right there. In fact, chickens coming home to roost way before, years before he got into all that trouble with that same metaphor with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. After all of that, you heard Abby Lincoln and Max Roach. They are married, victims of white supremacy. Their song, Triptych, Triptych, Prayer, Protest. Importantly, that song performance is on Belgian television. You can watch that whole performance on YouTube. That song performance is in the documentary film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It's at the end of the film. It's synced up with the riot at the UN facilities in New York after lots of people found out that Lumumba has been assassinated, and we're going to hear about that in the book later on. But I played it this week because Abby Lincoln and Max Roach, they were mentioned last week. Abby Lincoln is going to become a very dominant figure in the book, as will Minister Malcolm X. They were both mentioned last week, and all of their added presence is going to revolve around Patrice Lumumba. I'm so excited, and yeah, nothing else really to say because that is exactly where we left off last week. All three of those folks, I think, mentioned, and Castro's visit to New York. We will take off chapter 8. Dr. Maya Angelou, The Heart of a Woman, Katherine Massey Book Club.
Chapter 8. One Monday morning, Hazel told me that over the weekend she had heard a South African freedom fighter speak. He was so thorough and so brilliant that even the biggest fool in the world had to see that apartheid was evil and would have to be brought down. His name was Lusumzi, make pronounced Make. A few volunteers standing in the outer offices had also heard the speaker. They joined in the conversation with added compliments. The smartest and calmest African I've ever heard. A little fat, but cute as he wants to be. Reminded me more of Dr. King than anybody I've ever seen. I asked his name again. Hazel said she had written it down and that the man was in the United States to petition at the United Nations against South Africa's racial policy. He was speaking again later in the week. Maybe we could attend the lecture together. I said maybe. A mound of cardboard boxes stood against my office wall. I opened them all. Each contained a beautiful piece of luggage and a note. Best wishes to my bride. I carried pleasure to my desk. Frank Sinatra, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and Sammy Davis, Jr. had agreed to give a benefit performance for the SCLC at Carnegie Hall. Jack Odell, a highly respected organizer, had joined the organization, and he was breaking down the hall seating. Stanley, Jack Murray, and I had to separate sections and price seats. Hotel accommodations had to be arranged for the famous Rat Pack and its entourage. Musicians' union officials had to be contacted and tickets drafted and ordered. High-paying patrons needed to be solicited and church groups contacted and asked to take blocks of seats. We were working late on Friday afternoon when Hazel said she had to go. She reminded me that Make was speaking and she was meeting her husband across town early so they could get good seats. She knew my being able to go along was out of the question. As she left, I asked her to take notes for me and tell me all about it on Monday. Work took over my weekend. I saw Guy only during the few hours on Saturday, and he came to the office to join other black and white young volunteers. Thomas was working a night shift, so I took a late-night subway to Brooklyn and walked the quiet streets home. Guy's note on the dining room table informed me that he was at a party. Home at 12:30 a.m. 12:30 was absolutely the limit. After all, he was barely 15. I was strict, and he was usually agreeable. I would lie across my bed with a book and stay awake to make sure that he honored his note. Morning found me in the same position and Guy sleeping innocently in his bedroom. Make had been more eloquent than the previous time. Hazel said a heckler had asked why 16 million Africans allowed 3 million whites to control them, reminding Make that we black Americans were only a tenth of the United States population, but we had stood up and fought back ever since we were brought here as slaves. Hazel said Make was devastating. First, he spoke of the black American struggle. He knew the history better than most black Americans. He talked about Denmark Vesey and Gabriel and all the known leaders of slave rebellions. He quoted Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey. He said that Dr. Du Bois was the father of Pan-Africanism, having attended the Pan-African Congress in Paris in 1919, where he stated clearly the idea of a free and united Africa. Make then systematically explained how Africa was bludgeoned by slavery, having her strongest sons and daughters stolen and brought to build the country of the slaves. He spoke of colonialism, the second blow that brought the continent to abjection. He said the spirit of Africa lives, but it is most vital in its descendants who have been struggling away from the motherland. At home in South Africa, the people needed help and encouragement from those of us who, knowing slavery firsthand, had found the oppressor to be a formidable but opposable foe. I made a note to go to hear Make the next time he spoke. Again, my responsibilities crowded out my intention. John Killen's phone on Thursday morning. Maya, I heard Make last night. Kind of expected to see you there. I explained that we were nearing the Carnegie Hall date. Well, he said, if you're free tomorrow night, come over to my place. Grace and I have asked a few people over to meet him. I'm working late tomorrow night, too. Come anytime. We'll get started around 8. We'll probably be going on until 1 or 2. Make is the representative of the Pan-African Congress. That's the radical organization, but he's coming with Oliver Tambo, the head of the African National Congress. The ANC is to the PAC what the NAACP is to the black Muslims. The two get along, though. Try to make it. Before leaving for work the next morning, I woke Guy and asked him to go to John's for dinner and said I would meet him there at 9:30. Chagrin at being a capricious and too often absent mother would get me to the Collenses' house. I left the office a little early, and after John opened the door, I walked through the milling crowd of acquaintances and strangers to end Guy, Chuck, Barbara, and Mom Willie in the kitchen. Guy looked up, then back at his watch and grinned. Mom Willie offered me food, but I declined and said I'd better go shake hands with the honored guests. Guy said, "He's going to knock you out, Mom." We talked a little. He's more brilliger than the sly toes. Guy was working so hard to appear grown up, I was surprised to hear him use his favorite childhood phrase. Make had made my reserved son relax and talk like a child again. I went to the living room and greeted Paul and John Clark, Sarah Wright, and Rosa. The air in the room crackled like static. John Killens introduced me to a small, trim, dark man. Maya Angelou, meet Oliver Tambo, a warrior from South Africa. Tambo shook my hand and bowed. John continued. And come here and meet Vusumzi Make, another South African warrior. Make's appearance surprised me. I had imagined him very tall and older. He was 3 inches shorter than I, and his baby face was surrounded by fat. He had broad shoulders and a wide waist, all encased in a beautifully cut pinstripe suit, and he was in his early 30s. Miss Angelou, glad to meet you. You represent the black hero Martin King, as I represent the South African black hero Robert Sabute. Hazel Gray has been telling me about you. If we had not met, I would have known you anyway. I've met Guy. His accent was delicious, a result of British deliberateness changed by the rhythm of an African tongue and the grace of African lips. I moved away after smiling, needing to sit apart and collect myself. I had not met such a man. He was intense and contained. His movements were economical and delicate, and he didn't seem to know that he was decidedly overweight. John's introduction was probably apt. He was a warrior, sure of his enemies and secure with his armament. Rosa left her African diplomat to join me on the couch. You met Make? He'd been asking to meet you. Take it easy, kid. She smiled for me alone and went back to her escort. Paul Marshall stood in front of me. Listen, Maya Angelou, what did you do to Make? He says he wants to know you better. I told her I only said hello. She said, must have been a hell of a hello. He asked me how well I knew you and if you were married. Paul laughed and flicked her eyes. I didn't say a word. It's up to you. John and Grace corralled their guests back to the living room where everyone found seats. After the chairs and sofas filled, people rested on footstools or wedged themselves between couches on the floor. John introduced Oliver Tambo, who talked about South Africa, the ANC, and its leader, Chief Albert Luthuli, in terse and controlled anger. We applauded the man and the cause that brought him to the United States. Then John introduced Mr. Make, and my love no longer was in the hands of Thomas Allen. Make started talking from a seated position, but passion lifted his voice and raised him out of the chair. He had been a defendant charged with treason in the trials after the Sharpeville massacre. The Africans, NCMPAC members, along with people who belonged to neither organization, had met in 1958 to oppose oppression in their country. They had been inspired by Martin Luther King and the SCLC. He looked over at me and nodded. They had been encouraged by Malcolm X and the Muslims to set themselves apart from their oppressors. When he finished, he asked for questions and sat down, dabbing at his face with a cloud of white handkerchief. My first reaction was to wish I could be the white cloth in his dark hand touching his forehead, digging softly in the corners of his lips. Intelligence always had a pornographic influence on me. He asked for questions and was immediately satisfied. Which organization was the most popular in South Africa? Was he really flirting with me? Did Luthuli and Sabute get along? Did fat men make love like thin ones? When would the average South African become politically aware? Was he married? What could we, as Black Americans, do to speed along the struggle? How long was he going to stay in New York? Make and Tambo shared the questions, volleying answers back and forth with the ease of professional tennis players. Make turn. Doesn't Miss Angelou have a question? Stage experience kept me from squirming. All attention shifted to me, and I shoved my real questions to the back of my head and asked, Mr. Make, would it be possible to solve the South African problem with an employment of nonviolence? He stood and walked to my corner. That which works for your reverend king cannot work in South Africa. Here, whether it is honored or not, there is a constitution. You at least have laws which say liberty and justice for all. You can go to courts and exact an amount of success. Witness your Supreme Court ruling of 1954. In South Africa, we Africans are written out of all tenets dealing with justice. We are not considered in the written laws dealing with fair play. We are not only brutalized and oppressed de facto, we are ignored de jure. He was standing over me, and I felt lucky. Fortunate to be a black American, and in comparison to him and his people, only slightly impaired by racism. But even more so fortunate. His eyes were on me, and I would have had to be thicker than raw pigskin not to know that something about me hooked him. I folded my arms and sat back as he used the time to develop his statement. He finished to standing applause and was wrapped around in seconds by a group of excited people. We caught sight of each other through the shifting bodies, but he never returned to my corner. After another drink, I went to collect Guy. My day started early, and Guy had his bakery job again. At the door, Make stopped us. "Miss Angelou, just a minute. Guy, I would be honored to see your mother home." Make knew that asking Guy's permission would please us both. My son smiled, loving the old world formality straight out of the Three Musketeers and the Corsican brothers. "Thank you, Mr. Make. I am seeing her home." I could have pinched him until he screamed. Make said, "Of course, thank you anyway." The big lunk almost bowed from the waist. "I hope we'll meet again, Miss Angelou. Good night." "Good night, Guy." He walked away and we went out the door. "He doesn't know that you're engaged, or he wouldn't have asked to take you home." Guy chattered all the way. "But he's really smart. He's from the Xhosa tribe. You know, Miriam Makeba's click song. Well, that's his language. He was a barrister, that's a lawyer, before he was placed in exile and escaped from South Africa." "When did he tell you all that?" "He came into the kitchen and talked to Chuck and Barbara and me. He just walked in, introduced himself, and sat down." Most politicians I had met, excluding Martin Luther King, thought talking to children a waste of their adult time. I was liking the African more and more. And obviously, I'd never see him again, and if we did meet, Thomas and my looming marriage stood between us. The next morning, Paul rang to say she was giving a little party that evening, and I had to come. I had another late night at work, and once I got to Brooklyn and changed, I really wouldn't be up to going back to Manhattan. She urged me to stop by after work, reassuring me that the party was to be very casual. I said I'd drop in. Late that afternoon, I called John to say how much I enjoyed meeting Make, adding that he was very impressive. He agreed and said I'd get to see him again that night at Paul's. The party was being given for Oliver Tambo and Make. I mulled over the possibilities for hours. If we met and he pursued, would I have the strength to resist, and did I really want to? Of course, last night was over, and he might bring a woman to Paul's. If he persisted, and if I surrendered, I'd have to break up with Thomas, and my dream of quiet security would evaporate. Make would leave the country, and I'd be back to where I was, or even worse. I'd be lonely and broken-hearted. I took a train directly to Brooklyn. It was Friday night. Guy gulped down his food and gave me a kiss. He was owed to a party, but would be in by 12:30. After a shower, I settled in my bed with a book, a drink, and a package of cigarettes. The ghost of Paul's party invaded the room. Specters of laughing black people, shouting and arguing, crowded around my bed. Make was in the middle of the throng, his pretty full moon face intense, his accent curving words into new shapes, his logic unarguable. If I went to the party, I called Thomas. He didn't answer. I did have a nice, rather new outfit that I could wear and open high heel sandals. Actually, it wouldn't take long to dress, and if I took a subway to Times Square, I could change to the AA local and get 3 blocks from Paul's building. Within a half hour, I was ringing her doorbell. Inside, the men and women crowded together in jubilation. The record player was onto a moderate volume, and jazz music weaved among the voices. I headed toward the living room, pushing through the crowded hallway. As I passed the kitchen, off to my left, I heard Make's voice. "Miss Angelou." He came to me, grinning a white teeth welcome. "I had just about given you up." He took my hand. "Paul said you come from work, but I suppose you went home to freshen up." I nodded and excused myself, saying I had to see Paul. In fact, I had to get away from the man's electricity. Sparks seemed to be shooting from him to my nipples and my ears. My underarms tingled and my stomach contents fell to my groin. I had never fainted in my life, but at that moment I felt I was sinking into a warm, black, and friendly pool. Paul laughed when she saw me. I know you didn't wear that to work. You're setting out to get him, aren't you, Maya Angelou? I got huffy and denied her accusation. I'm going to be married, Paul. I'm no chicken shit floozy. Her ready temper answered. Well, excuse the hell out of me. She went to join other guests. I was a fool. I lied and offended my friend at the same time. Make made no further attempt to talk to me. The music was stopped and Tambo's voice could be heard as the talking quieted. He spoke briefly, repeating the speech of the night before. Ken Marshall asked Make to say a few words, and he walked to the center of the living room. I didn't listen to his words, but used the time to study his body. He had closely cut, soft, crinkled hair and an even dark brown skin. Big round black eyes, which moved slowly, taking in the details of his listeners. There were a few hairs on his chin, which he fingered with small hands as he talked. His chest bloomed above an indented waist, then his hips widened out in a nearly feminine voluptuousness. Fat thighs touched under the sharply creased trousers, and his small feet were encased in highly polished shoes. I completed the investigation and decided Make was the ideal man. I gave him a few sultry looks, and when his back was turned, I raced downstairs and stopped a cab. I justified the expense of a taxi ride to Brooklyn by telling myself I was paying for my honor. The American Society for African Culture had its annual black tie ball on Saturday night in the ballroom of a midtown hotel, and as coordinator for the SCLC, I was expected to attend. Thomas was working late, so Rosa and her escort met me in Manhattan. Her African diplomat wore embroidered pants and a matching voluminous overshirt which reached the floor. The man was blue-black and spectacular. His unquestionable dignity gave the lie to the concept that black people were by nature inferior. His presence alone refuted the idea that our descendants had been naked subhumans living in trees 3 centuries before when the whites raided them on the African continent. That elegance could not have been learned in 300 years. The dance auditorium was filled with black women made up and coiffed and beautiful in Dior and Balenciaga gowns or in dresses run up by local seamstresses. African women floated, serene-faced in their colorful national dress, and a few whites mingled with black men in tuxedos or outfits like that worn by Rosa's friend. I left my friends to check in at the table reserved for the SCLC. The Grays were watching the dancing couples, and when I greeted them, Hazel jumped. Oh, there you are. So you met him after all. I knew who she meant. He was over here a few minutes ago asking for you. I saw him coming across the dance floor like an ocean liner plying through tugboats toward a pier. He asked me to dance. He moved surprisingly well for his bulk, and his enjoyment of the dance made him seem less serious. He pulled me to him, and I felt the hardness under the layers of surrounding fat. He laughed. You're afraid of me, aren't you? A big girl like you, an American sophisticate, frightened by a little black man from the dark continent. Why should I be afraid of you? He was still laughing. Maybe you think I'll think you are a missionary and I'll eat you. I don't think that. Anyway, if more Africans had eaten more missionaries, the continent would be in better shape. He stopped dancing and looked at me with approval. Miss Angelou, you have every reason to be alarmed. I intend to change your life. I am going to take you to Africa. I drew my body straight and made my face uninviting. Mr. Make, I am going to be married in 2 months. So your plan is impossible. I have heard that, but where is the elusive groom? I've seen you 3 times, and except for your son, you've been without male companionship. I defended Thomas. My fiancé is working. And what does this diligent man do? He was smirking. He knew the answer to his question. He's a bail bondsman, and I'm going to see him after the dance tonight. Make grabbed my hand and led me back to my table. He pulled out my chair, and after I sat, he leaned to me and whispered, I went to our people to save you. When you see your bloody fianc, tell him that I'm after you and that with me every day is Saturday night and I'm black and I'm dangerous. He left and my heart threatened to stop. I went home early and alone. Guy was asleep and the house was cavernous. Thomas answered the telephone. Had I enjoyed the fancy dress ball? No, he was too tired to come and pick me up. No, I shouldn't call a taxi. After all, we see each other the next day. He was taking me to the movies. Sleep didn't come to me willingly. Thoughts raced, chasing each other like lively children in a game of tag. Marry a man I hadn't even slept with and go to Africa. Leave Martin King and my own struggle. But all the black struggles were won with one enemy and one goal. Thomas would shoot me with his service pistol. Why did Make want me? He didn't know me or my background. But then I didn't know him either. What about Guy? Surely Make didn't expect me to leave my son. A chance for Guy to finish growing up in Africa. Suppose the man was too fat to make love. I knew of black women who had maimed husbands who refused them sex. I wouldn't go to that extreme. On the other hand, I didn't think I would stay with a man who couldn't satisfy me. Speculation was a waste of time. I was going to marry Thomas, and we'd live a nice, complacent life in Brooklyn. The next night, the movie was deadly boring. I got up on the pretext of wanting a soft drink, and I sat in the lobby smoking and wondering what Make was doing. Patrice Lumumba was in New York. Rosa was going to meet him and his assistant, Thomas Kanza. Abby and Max were performing in the Village. Malcolm X was speaking at a public meeting in Harlem, and somewhere Make was showering his listeners with glittering words. Guy was attending a youth rally in Washington Square Park. The world was on fire. Thomas headed the car toward his street. I don't feel like going to your house. I told him. He looked over at me, but I kept my face straight ahead. Are you all right? It's not that time of month, is it? No. I just want to go home. No, he hadn't offended me. No, I wasn't sick. I told him we were living in exciting times and that because of the United Nations, Africans and oppressed people from all over the world were making New York the arena where they fought for justice. I haven't lost anything in Africa, and they haven't lost anything in our country. They can all go back where they came from as far as I'm concerned. Anyhow, I get all the excitement I need in my job, and I don't want to hear about politics at home. It was a long speech for Thomas and a disastrous one for our relationship. I could imagine future aborted conversations when I would be silenced. Days, weeks, months would pass with neither of us going beyond small talk. I prepared dinner at home and waited alone for Guy to return. The next days brought bouquets of mixed flowers and vases of red roses to cover my desk and make me feel like a desirable courtesan. The accompanying cards read, From Vusumzi Make to Maya Angelou Mate. Hazel looked worried and Millie grinned as if she and I were sharing a secret. Thomas chose the same time to have more wedding presents delivered. Young, shabbily dressed men hauled boxes up the stairs and deposited them in the outer offices. Tom to Maya. I opened the cartons to find an expensive record player covered in smooth leather and 2 more pieces of matching luggage. It was a flattering present, but I couldn't dispel the idea that the set was stolen property. I refused Make's daily invitations to lunch and declined Thomas's offer to visit his apartment. Confusion had me spread-eagled. I couldn't run, nor could I dodge. Office politics were further irritations. Despite the long hours and what I thought of as my diligent commitment, 2 more men had been brought in to help in the running of the organization. I had had nothing to say about their employment. After a business lunch with the president of a national Negro women's club where we discussed the selling of a large block of tickets, it was suggested that I report the results to the office newcomers. When I refused to do so, insisting on my own autonomy, loyalties began to shift. Welcoming smiles faded or gleamed sunshine bright. Small groups of workers crowded the desks of the new arrivals, while Hazel and Millie used every slight occasion to enter my office, bringing me news or coffee, fresh papers or mail. Chapter 9. Thursday morning, I agreed to meet Make for lunch a few blocks from my office. I would explain to him why he had to accept my rejection. Wells' restaurant, Pride of Harlem, on 132nd Street and 7th Avenue, had been popular since the 20s, when it was a favorite stop on the route of whites, visiting what many called nigger heaven. The food had remained good. The menu still listed white items such as steaks and lamb chops, but its main offerings, fried chicken, smothered pork chops, short ribs, and biscuits, catered to the local palates. Make stood as I entered. He wore yet another well-tailored suit and custom-made shirt. I didn't need to look at his shoes to know they were shining like new money. He began talking before I sat down. He was pleased that I had overcome my timidity. My coming showed I had courage, a virtue which we both knew was a prerequisite in the struggle. He had talked to Paul Marshall by telephone and told her that his intention was to marry me and take me to Africa. I couldn't focus on the menu, but we ordered lunch. He continued talking and I ate food I could neither see nor taste. He had been jailed for political action in South Africa. When the government released him, the police took him to an isolated desert area near Southwest Africa and left him there, hundreds of miles from the nearest human beings. A city-bred man with no knowledge of open country, he had scrabbled over rocky ridges and found water. He pulled caterpillars from shrubs and ate them. They taste a lot like shrimp. He encountered a group of Hottentot hunters, and because he could speak a little of their language, they gave him dried meat and a small water pouch. Keeping away from large towns and following the stars, he walked out of South Africa into Bechuanaland. The Boers' control and spies had pervaded that country as well, so he kept to the forest. He made a slingshot and killed small animals and ate them raw or cooked when it was safe enough to light a fire. Their skins padded his worn-out shoes or were laid inside his shirt for warmth. Days passed when the only things he saw moving were the vultures that blazed high in the sky above him. He walked through South and North Rhodesia, making sparse contacts with revolutionaries he had heard about who were themselves in hiding or on the run. He took his first breath of freedom when he crossed into Ethiopia. I was the first Pan-African Congress member to escape. But Miss Angelou, when I left exile without water or food, I intended to reach Ethiopia. When I knew I was coming to the U.S., I came with the intention of finding a strong, beautiful black American woman who would be a helpmate, who understood the struggle and who was not afraid of a fight. I heard about you and you sounded like the one. I met Guy and I was impressed with his manliness and intelligence, obviously your work, and then I saw you. He reached across the table and took my hand. His little brown fingers tapered down to small white nails. I tried to picture those exquisite hands carrying caterpillars wiggling to his mouth. You are exactly what I dreamed on my long march. Tall and clear-eyed, needing to be loved, ready to fight and needing protection, and not the protection of a bloody bail bondsman. Oh Lord, that reminded me. Mr. Make, I agreed to have lunch with you to tell you I am going to marry the bloody bail bondsman. He leaned his bulk back in the chair and his face darkened and clouded over with resignation. You are breaking my heart. I am an African with large things to do. I have left my father and mother in Joburg, and given the ordinary run of time, I shall never see them again. Unless the revolution takes place during my lifetime, I shall never see the land again. To an African, the family and the land. I need you. I want to marry you. I'm sorry. And God knew I meant that. I shall finish at the UN tomorrow. On the next day, I shall ride to Amsterdam, an open city where I am told whiskey is cheap and a variety of entertainment is available to a lonely man. I saw those delicate hands sliding over white women's bodies and in their long, lank hair. But I couldn't imagine him kissing the white lips. I shall stay in Amsterdam 4 or 5 days, and then I shall go to Copenhagen, another open city. My desire for you is total, Miss Angelou. I want your mind and spirit and your body. After all, I may be an African with a mission, but I am also a man. I must attend a conference in London in 10 days, but before the conference, I must try to drive thoughts of you out of my mind. He stopped talking, and I waited in the silence for a second before I excused myself and went to the toilet. Wells had wasted none of its elegance on the women's room. There were 2 small cubicles for toilets and a small outer area which was only large enough for 2 people. A woman bumped into me on her way out. She saw the tears on my face. "Hey, are you okay? You sick?" I shook my head and walked through the open door. She poked her head in. "You sure you don't need any help?" I shook my head again and thanked her. The little mirror over the washstand was vague with dust, but I looked in it and saw misery in sharp outline. If I went through with the wedding to Thomas, I would load our marriage with such disappointment the structure couldn't stand. He was too good a man to abuse, yet I knew that I would never forget or forgive the facts. Because of him, I would have lost Make, a life of beckoning adventure, and Africa. Africa. I would hate him for that. And Make needed me. I would be a help to him. I was brave. Abby had once told me I was too crazy to be afraid. I would be a fool to let Make go to a bunch of whorish white women in Amsterdam. In fact, I might be betraying the entire struggle. I wouldn't do that. And then Guy would have the chance to have an African father. There could be no greater future for a Black American boy than to have a strong, Black, politically aware father. His being African would add an enriching spice. Admitting for the first time a decision I had made at the fancy dress ball, I would accept Make's offer. I called Abby from a payphone. She answered. "Just wanted to make sure you were there." "What's happening?" "Nothing yet. I'll call back." "Are you all right?" "Yeah." "Really?" "I'll call you in a few minutes." Make stood again as I reached the table. I sat down and took the napkin in my hands. The words refused to get themselves in order. "Mr. Make, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll go with you." His face broke open, a brown moon splitting, showing its white core. The room was filled with large even teeth and shining round eyes. "I'll marry you, Miss Angelou. I'll make you happy. We will be known as the happiest family in Africa." He came around the table and pulled me to my feet to kiss me. I noticed other customers for the first time and drew away. Make laughed, turning to the tables of Black people openly watching us. "It is all right. She has just said she'll marry me." Applause and laughter. The folks liked the happy story. He held my hand as if I had just won a race. This is the joining of Africa and Africa-America. 2 great peoples back together again. I tried to sit back down. He was going to make a speech. A laugh rumbled up his chest and between the perfect teeth. "No." I claimed my engagement kiss. His lips were full and soft. Shaken by the physical touching, we took our seats again. The woman who had offered to help me in the toilet came to our table. "Honey, I should have known you weren't crying out of sadness." She smiled. "You all have a drink with us. We've been married 18 of the best years of my life." A man's voice shouted across the room. "Ernestine, just offer the folks a drink and come on back and sit down." The woman grinned. "See how nice we get along." He orders. I obey. Sometimes. Make and I laughed as she strutted back to her table. After a few nervous minutes of finding no way to say all the things which needed to be said, I asked Make if he was free for the afternoon. He said he was. I excused myself and went to the telephone. "I've done it this time, Ab." "Done what?" "It. I've told Lusumzi Make I'll marry him." "Who?" Her voice was strong with shock. "A South African freedom fighter. He's brilliant, Abby, and pretty. Beautiful, in fact. And we've fallen in love. Well, hell, Maya Angelou, what about Thomas? I want to talk to you about that. Seems like to me you'll have to talk to Thomas." At the moment, that chore didn't seem so onerous. "I wish you'd come down to Wells and meet him and take him to your house. I have to go back to the office, but I'll come over after work." "Will you?" She didn't use a second to deliberate. "Of course I'll come. Are you going to wait, or do I just walk in and ask for the African who's going to marry Maya Angelou?" I told Make that my friend, Abby Lincoln, was coming to pick him up. He recognized her name immediately and began to tell me how the Max Roach or Abby Lincoln records were smuggled into South Africa and then passed around like the hot revolutionary material they were. He knew the title of every track and most of the words to all their songs. The man, indeed, was a wonder. When I looked through the window and saw Abby double parking her Lincoln sedan, we left the restaurant. Abby got out of the car and shook hands with my latest fiancé. They drove away, and the rest of the afternoon passed like Elm in slow motion, starring a stranger. I answered telephones, signed letters, spoke to volunteers, but my mind hovered somewhere between the Serengeti Plains, Thomas's apartment in Brooklyn, and the sweet scent of patchouli which rose each time Mr. Make shifted his heavy body. Max and Mr. Make were talking, and Abby was preparing dinner when I arrived at the Columbus Avenue apartment. Abby shouted a welcome from the kitchen, and both men embraced me. Make said proudly, "Ah, here is my beautiful wife." Max nodded. "Maya, you got yourself one this time." "Yeah, you got yourself a man." I sat through dinner in a stupor. Max and Abby's place was no more real than my office had been. A man I had met exactly 1 week earlier was grinning possessively at me across the table. Max, who had seen enough of life to be healthily suspicious, approved of the stranger. Later, when I helped Abby dry the dishes, she said that she thought I was better suited to the unknown Make than to the known Thomas. And anyway, I was just wild enough to make it work. Make slipped close to me over the ribbing of the corduroy couch. "I am tired and would like to rest. Max has said I might stretch out in that room." I was supposed to agree. I did want to grab his hand and lug him to bed, but I said, "Mr. Make, please, we are going to be married. Call me Vooz." "Vooz, I'm obliged to clear up the matter with Thomas." Make leaned against the back of the sofa and kept quiet for a few minutes. "Yes, I agree. But when you talk to him, I want to be present. He might be difficult. I'll speak to him alone tomorrow night. And then, shouldn't I come with you? It might be dangerous." I refused his offer. Talking with Thomas was my responsibility. My pompous idiocy had gotten me into the mess, and rash emotion was further complicating the jumble. And I felt a little excitement at the coming confrontation. Then I shall be the one to talk to Guy. I'm going to be his father, and we must begin our relationship properly. Vooz put me into a taxi heading for Brooklyn. Guy had rocks in the jaws and in his eyes. He had called the office and had been told that I had left early. He went to the Collenses, and they had no news of my whereabouts. Thomas hadn't heard from me, and Paul Marshall didn't know where I was. He couldn't find Abby's number. He chided me. It wasn't fair to insist that he be considerate and phone home if I was going to treat him with casual indifference. It was nearly 11 o'clock. 3 men looked to me for proof of devotion. My son expected warmth, food, housing, clothes, and stability. He could be certain that no matter which way my fortune turned, he would receive most of the things he desired. Stability, however, was not possible in my world. Consequently, it couldn't be possible in his. Too often I had had to decline unplayable hands dealt to me by a capricious life and take fresh cards just to remain in the game. My son could rely on my love, but never expect our lives to be unchanging. Thomas wanted equilibrium also. He was looking for a nice wife who was a good cook and was neither so pretty nor so ugly that she drew attention to herself. I tried his number again. I had to tell him that he hadn't yet found his mate. He didn't answer the ring. Vooz saw me as the flesh of his youthful dream. I would bring to him the vitality of jazz and the endurance of a people who had survived 350 years of slavery. With me in his bed, he would challenge the loneliness of exile. With my courage added to his own, he would succeed in bringing the ignominious white rule in South Africa to an end. If I didn't already have the qualities he needed, then I would just develop them. Infatuation made me believe in my ability to create myself into my lover's desire. That would be nothing for a stepper. At dawn, Thomas answered the telephone. He said he would pick me up from the O's and collect the wedding gifts. We would stop at my house, and after dinner with Guy, we would go back to his apartment for A little you know what. The day jerked itself to evening in stops and starts. Time either wouldn't move at all or it raced like a whirlwind. At last, and too soon, Thomas stood in my office doorway, smiling, showing his death-white teeth. "Hey, baby, where's the stuff?" I said hi and pointed him to the cartons against the wall. While I was saying good night to the office staff, he carried the gifts downstairs, and when I joined him on the pavement, he was loading them in the trunk of his car. He was still smiling. I wondered how could anybody say goodbye to a smiling man. "You like the luggage, baby?" "Yes." "Where did you buy it?" The question wiped the smile from his face. "Why?" "Oh, in case I want to add to the set." He relaxed and the smile returned as full as it was before. "I got them from a fellow I know, and if you want some more, I'll get them for you." I had suspected that the bags were stolen when they appeared in my office in supermarket cardboard boxes, and Thomas now confirmed my suspicions. I needed all the hurt feelings I could muster for the imminent farewell scene, so I kept quiet and waited. At home, Guy watched television and Thomas read the sports pages while I cooked dinner. I knew that, but for my shocking plans, we were acting out the tableau of our future. Into eternity. Guy would be in his room, laughing at I Love Lucy, and Thomas would be evaluating the chances of an athlete or a national baseball team, and I would be leaning over the stove, preparing food for the shining dinner hour. Into eternity. We ate without excitement, and Guy said goodnight, going back to his room. Thomas rose to bring in the luggage, but I stopped him. "I have some talk for you. Why don't we have a drink?" I began talking slowly and quietly. "I've met a South African. He escaped over the desert. He kept himself alive by eating worms. The whites sent him out to die, but he survived. He has come to the United States, and he deserves our support." I looked at Thomas, who had become a terrapin, his large head withdrawn into his shoulders, his eyes steady and unblinking. I continued my story, saying that the man was inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King and had come to petition the United Nations on behalf of his people. I used small words and short sentences as if I were telling a fairy tale to a child. Thomas was not enthralled. I said, "A large conference is going to be held in London where other people who have escaped from South Africa will meet and form a joint freedom-fighting organization." So far, I was telling the truth. But since I didn't have the courage to tell Thomas I was leaving him, I knew I was building up to a lie. The man in front of me had turned into a big red rock, and his freckles blotched dark brown on his face. Indians from the South Africa Indian Congress and Africans from both South Africa and Southwest Africa will take 2 weeks to work out an accepted charter. As we know, in unity there is strength. There was no light in Thomas's eye. We sat in dangerous silence. I balled up my nerve. Anyway, this African I've just met has asked me to attend the conference. They want a Black American woman who can explain the philosophy of nonviolence. I was getting there. Thomas twitched his shoulders, raised his body an inch, then slid deeper into the chair. His eyes still reflected nothing. "I have decided to accept the invitation and deliver a paper on Martin Luther King." The invention came as a wonderful surprise. I had been searching all day and during the preparation of dinner in vain for a way to say what I had to say, and nothing had come to me. Obviously, apprehension had sharpened my imagination. "I don't know how long I'll be gone, but I may go to Africa after that." Thomas, in an unexpectedly fast move, sat up straight. He looked at me, his face wise and hard. "You got another nigger." He hadn't raised his voice. "All that shit was to tell me you got yourself another nigger." The moment I dreaded and had lied to avoid had arrived. "Say it. Say it in plain words. Say, Thomas." He mimicked my speech. "Thomas, I got myself another nigger, say it." He was the interrogator and I was the suspect. "Well, he's not a nigger. He's African, ain't he? Then he's a nigger just like me and just like you. Except you try to act like a goddamn old fake girl." but you just as much a nigger as I am. And so is your goddamn holy Martin Luther King, another blackest nigger. He knew I loathed that word and didn't allow its use in my home. Now each time he said nigger, he sharpened it and thrust it, rapier-like, into my body. Thomas. I forced a sweet calm into my voice. Thomas, there doesn't seem to be anything more to say. He denied that we had come to the end of our conversation and the end of the relationship. I was acting above my station, putting on airs like my city friends who were talking about freedom and writing stupid books that nobody read. Thinking I was white, raising my son to use big words and act like a white boy. His sister had told him to watch out for me. I didn't mean him no good. I thought I was better than his family. I didn't move even to pick up my drink. He spoke, letting the profanity and his dislike of me fill the room. He would be surprised if that African didn't leave me stranded in London or in Africa, and I come back, dragging my ass, trying to make him feel grateful for a chance to fuck me. Well, don't think that he'd be around. Forget his phone number. In fact, tomorrow, he would have his phone number changed. I noted with relief that he was already talking about tomorrow. His shoulders fell and he leaned back against the chair, his energy spent. I still didn't move. He rose and walked out of the room, and I followed. He was so large, he filled the entry. In a sharp move, he jerked back the curtain which covered the oval window at the door. Come here. I was afraid to refuse, so I wedged myself close to him. Look at that woman. Across the street, a lone black woman walked under hazy streetlight carrying 2 full shopping bags. I didn't know her. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out his gun. You know something? I could blow that broad's head off, and I wouldn't do a day. He put the pistol back into its holster, opened the door, and walked down the steps to his car. I made another drink and thanked God for blessing me yet one more time. I had hurt Thomas's ego, but I had not broken his heart. He wasn't injured enough to attack me, but he would never want to see me again.
Katherine Massey Book Club, context of white supremacy. So we'll pick up, we are still in chapter 8, kind of midpoint. We'll pick up Stanley and Jack Murray accepted my news without surprise. That's what we'll pick up at when we get to the second portion of the audio. We're in chapter 9. Sorry, I got discombobulated about my chapters, but not where we are in the text. Chapter 9, I guess it's midway through the chapter. Stanley and Jack Murray accepted my news without surprise. Anywho, the number to dial, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I was a little bit ahead, although it was applicable then, but I could have played it again this week. Man, that section where Dr. Angelou is in the late John Singleton's Poetic Justice, and she's talking to the great Regina King. Janet Jackson's not in the scene, but Dr. Angelou is there, and she says, are you in love? That L word again, and they go through all that, and she says, that child is not married, talking about Regina King's character. That child is not married, out there flirting with another man and just hopping to and fro and all that, and the other black ladies that she's with, they're a little bit older. They said, well, she's just young. You were like that when you were young, too, talking to Dr. Angelou. And Dr. Angelou turns and she says, yes, but I was never flitty. I was never flitty. What we have read here, this is the definition of flitty. And it was said in jest when they questioned her, never flitty. Indeed, everybody, they should have just brought this book. Like, what about this here, Dr. Angelou? What about this here? I know Brother Thomas, if he's still alive, said, Flitty, you want to talk about some Flitty? Please. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Now, before we get to the emails, folks who have commentary dialed in, all that good stuff, the CIA component of all of this. Now, we're reading this book, Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. CIA is heavily mentioned in that film. They discuss the CIA involvement in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. They were mentioned in Andrée Blouin's book as well. Their involvement in the Congo for years and years and years, decades, for reals. I'm sure Apple is one of their homies at this point as well. With the involvement of the CIA, it pops up in the documentary film that there are different African entertainers, Dr. Angelou, but different African entertainers, musicians, of the like, who are being sent to the continent and other parts of the world, and this is to, hey, look how well we treat our Negroes. Racism isn't a problem in the U.S. Look at here, Satchmo, sing some tunes or play some tunes, and the Dizzy Gillespie, yeah, play that horn. See there, we treat our Negroes, phenomenal. Racism is not a problem. We've taken care of it. It's really, we pretty much whipped that racism thing. And they said that some of the black people that they were using in all this, entertainers and such, they were not aware of what the reasoning behind all of this and how all of this was being manipulated by very powerful racists on a global level. Duh. Who is more informed about white supremacy, racism, what it is, how it works all over the world? Still today, 2030. The group that we heard, the American Society of African Culture. I had never heard that before, but I mean, it was in capital letters, like this is a proper noun, like this is an official organization. It's like, wow, what is this? I've never heard this before. So they have like a listing about the history of this group and prominent people that were a part of it, 1950s, 1960s, all of that. But article pops up. There are many articles, but I just picked one. This is from the Washington Post. I picked it because I feel like I often will pick, if I go older articles, it'll be the New York Times or the LA Times. Lots of folks, New York Times will be the paper of record. This is the Washington Post, but I could have picked New York Times too. 8 more groups linked to CIA's fund activities. And this is February 21, yikes, 1967, so this is 2 years removed from the assassination of Minister Malcolm X. New links between the Central Intelligence Agency, the American business establishment, and the private U.S. cultural and educational groups were disclosed yesterday. Tax returns on file with the Foundation's subcommittee of the House, headed by Representative Wright Patman, Democrat, Texas, revealed that both Benjamin Rosenthal Foundation and Aaron E. Norman Fund of New York have been used as conduits for CIA funds. Edmund A. Rosenthal, a vice president and director of the United States Playing Card Company, is the president and treasurer of the Rosenthal Fund. The Norman Fund is represented by the New York law firm Rosenman, K. Petschek and Freund. One of the senior partners of the firm is Samuel I. Roseman, a member of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal Brain Trust. Others may be involved. There was also strong indication yesterday of CIA involvement in the Lucius N. Littauer Foundation of New York, the Cleveland H. Dodge Foundation of New York, the McGregor Fund of Detroit, the Marshall Foundation of Houston, the W. Alton Jones Foundation of New York, and the Pappas Charitable Trust of Boston. The Littauer Foundation many years ago funded the Center for Public Administration at Harvard, now known as the Kennedy Institute. Whew, wow. That is such a, wow, that is stunning. If you don't know about the Kennedy Institute at Harvard, like, wow, that is founded by the C.O.W.S. Woo, that is crazy. Okay, let's continue. The Jones Foundation was established by the late W. Alton Jones, chairman of the city's service company and an intimate friend of former President Eisenhower. The other foundations linked to the CIA during the past week, the groups examined yesterday, apparently functioned as fronts for the discreet disbursement of government funds. Dummy groups set up. Both the Rosenthal and Norman Foundations received, according to their tax returns, substantial sums from dummy organizations, in quotes, established by the CIA, the Edsel, Price Tower, and San Miguel funds. The Norman Fund received $35,000 from these sources in the 1962-64 period and passed on contributions to organizations that have received funds from other CIA conduits. The African American Institute, I haven't even heard of that before. The African American Institute, the African Society, the American Society, make sure I got that correct, the American Society of African Culture, United States National Student Association, the Pan American Foundation, and the International Development Fund. Come on. It's the Rosenthal Fund received $205,000 from the same CIA sources from 1960 through 1964. Its principal beneficiaries were the American Society of African Culture, the African American Institute, the Asia Foundation, International Development Foundation, and a mysterious organization in Washington known as the Vernon Fund. I don't even know what that is. It goes on to give a little bit more detail, but that is a lot. Like, this is from 1967. So by the time you do the inflation calculator on $205,000 from way back then, 60 years basically, I'm sure that's well over $1 million, probably over $2 million being dispersed to these different organizations. One of them being the African or the American Society of African Culture. Wow, what are you supposed to do with all this money? Is this to spy on black people? Is this to get black people to write things that you want about subject matter that you want and not about things that you don't want them to write about? Like, what is all this money supposed to buy? Man, oh man. Now, again, who is more informed about white supremacy? That was what I think we said previously about, you got all these white people volunteering. Like, dang, if you got all these hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing, yeah, if I'm white and I'm on COINTELPRO, you could even use some of that money to get some Negro subsidiaries so that they can go spy. Like, I have a few Negroes on my staff. They go out and spy and report back. What are they up to in SLC or any other groups? Organization of African American Unity, Black Muslims, Elijah Muhammad, all of them, have a few Negroes that we pay off and they come back and report to us. They do a good job. We give them an extra piece of cornbread. But you can study that to yourself. I'd never even heard of that organization. There was lots of this going on in that time period. Again, Kenneth O'Reilly, Racial Matters. Dr. Welsing said, if you haven't read that book, you can't talk about racism. Okay. We'll get to the emails and people who dialed in as well. *61. See, we'll do one email and then get to folks who dialed in. I'll get to my notes as well. Email 1, greetings Gus, listeners and callers. Enjoying this text immensely. I was unaware of Dr. Angelou's activism during the earlier, younger part of her life. Talked about that last week. What a fascinating woman, female. Prior to this text, my impression of her was comprised almost entirely of her poetry, supporting acting roles and connections to Oprah. I think the usual suspects may have downplayed this earlier aspect of her life, but I could be wrong. Kudos to you, Gus, and the world's greatest book club. Much obliged. I'm not sure. We'd have to have better participation. We generally have pretty lousy participation, pretty much from day one. I think great book clubs have great participation, and from people who actually do pay attention, read the actual text. So, yeah. Any hoodles. I don't know. I think it is. That is noteworthy. I will say that for someone of Dr. Angelou's stature, right? She's been dead for over a decade at this point. I think for most people, period, and I would suspect most people probably of any age group, like I suspect you could go and ask people that are in their 40s, 50s, teens, 20s, whatever, white people, non-white people, people classified as black, whatever. I suspect you could go ask large numbers of them, and they never read this book, never heard of this book, probably don't even know that Dr. Angelou didn't just write one autobiography, that she had such a rich experience that she wrote a whole big chunky autobiography series of 7 books. I'm sure that most, folks don't know that. In fact, I'd never seen any of the other books in the series. I only thought she had one that we read. That was what I thought. I'd heard that from other people too. I didn't even know, and I'd never seen any of these other books. When I saw the other 7, it's like, whoa, look at that. That's crazy. Like, I see in school and such, college and high school and such, I see all kinds of students with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and we got to read this, and compare and contrast, and yum, yum, yum. I've never heard anyone mention any of these other books, and then the details and things that they get, like she was on a first-name basis with Abby Lincoln. What? And she met Dr. Martin Luther King? What? And she met Malcolm. Like, just that alone, to be able to get all the details of all of these people that she's meeting, and that John Killen, like all of the Fred Shuttlesworth talked about that last week. Like, that is amazing. This is an amazing period of time to have someone of her stature again, kind of writing down what she's doing. Billie Holiday and all these folks, an experience that she's having. It is amazing that why not read all 7 books in school, or at least go through and pick different ones. Why would it just pile up on the first book? Anywho, we'll keep that in mind as we read. Chapter 8, page 112, South African freedom fighter Vusumuzi Mackay died in 2006 at age 75. Was also a professor at the University of Liberia, 1968 to 1974. Has 1 daughter. 2, Frank Sinatra, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, and Sammy Davis Jr., Jewish, had agreed to give benefit performance for the SCLC at Carnegie Hall. Hotel accommodations had to be arranged for the famous Rat Pack and its entourage. The group first consisted of Humphrey Bogart, Judy Garland, David Niven, Angie Dickinson, Frank Sinatra, talent agent Swifty Lazar, and restaurant Mike Romanoff, so named by Bogart's wife, actress Lauren Bacall, who, seeing them after a drunken weekend, said they looked like a rat pack. After the death of Bogart, the group evolved into the lineup mentioned in the text. The new iteration preferred to refer themselves as the Klan. Interesting name change, given that they now have a black member. Racist joke, perhaps. They engaged in a lot of what you would call like racial humor, racist jokes. They would do lots of that with Sammy Davis Jr. and him saying what I just said, like, hey, I'm not black, I'm Jewish, doing that type of thing, and you all are white, and lots of that. So I'm sure they made that a part of their routine, that we are the Klan with Sammy Davis. Let's see, and even they have that in the newspaper about some of these benefit concerts that were done for the SCLC, and they go over some of the jokes. Maybe if I have time, I'll read some of what the newspaper said about their benefit show. 3, Hazel and McKay. Hazel said McKay was devastating. First, he spoke of the black American struggle. He knew the history better than most black Americans. He talked about Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and all the known leaders of slave rebellions. Whatever knowledge we do have is primarily due to racist man and racist woman. Absolutely, and sometimes you get in trouble for even mentioning these people's names. 4, he said the spirit of Africa lives but is most vital in its descendants who have been struggling away from the motherland. At home in South Africa, the people needed help and encouragement from those of us who, knowing slavery firsthand, had found the oppressor to be a formidable but opposable foe. VGQ, Victims Guarantee Qualified Slogans, and confusion is international among non-white victims in the global system of racism, white supremacy. That's what I said. I wrote on social media earlier today. I said, what would be my assessment of the first portion of the book that we've read, especially because we're getting kind of close to having read half of the book. Actually, yep, we're getting very close to having read half of the book. By the time we finish today, we will have read more than half of this book. So at this point, I think you can make an honest assessment. I said the first portion of the book, the major themes, black slogans, jargon, rhetoric, black and I'm proud, stay black and die, what he just said, like lots of just cliches, we got to stay together and all that, lots of Negro slogans and rhetoric, which was very common during this time period, so that is appropriate, and then really lousy parenting. And then we got that on display again this week. Those were my major impressions from the first half of the book, really. Those would be the main impressions from the first half of the book. There's certainly, lots else to pick through, but slogans, Negro jargon, love would be included in that, and then really lousy parenting. I mean, as lousy, pitiful, extra, 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 extra. It just goes on and on and on. Just pitiful, pitiful, pitiful parenting. And she agrees. She said loudly, pitiful parenting. Oof. Let's see. Chapter 9. Wells Restaurant, Pride of Harlem, on 132nd Street and 7th Avenue, had been popular since the 20s when it was favorite stop on the route of whites visiting what many called Negra Heaven. The white supremacists have conditioned us to denigrate each other in all areas of people activity. That seems kind of delectable Negro, too. This restaurant stop that is supposed to be nigger heaven. You get to go in and it's plantational. The black people serve you up food and such. Incidentally, that would be another one in terms of this lie that white people are ignorant about racism and white people don't hang out with black people and they just don't spend time. That is a total lie. They come and kick it with black people whenever they want to. If it means that they have to get a plane and fly out of Europe and go to Jamaica, someplace in the Caribbean, and hang out with the locals there, or go to Africa and kick it and hang out with the locals for a little while and do a little jamboree, sing a little Bob Marley, and then they fly back across the water with their memories, got cell phone full of pictures and such, had a grand old time, smoked a little wacky tobacco and such. But white people have done that forever. We've heard about it. That's even in Sundown Towns, James Lowen's book, where he talks about they boot the niggers out, and then they make Niggertown or Africaville or whatever they call it, but they put the vice over there, and then they still come to do some prostitution, some gambling. You got nigger whorehouses or whatever it is, whatever they claim it. That's in Minister Malcolm X's autobiography. He said he did that. My God, we read this. We read all this before. 2, police took him, McKay, to an isolated desert area near southwest Africa and left him there, hundreds of miles from the nearest human beings. He made a slingshot and killed small animals and ate them raw or cooked when it was safe enough to light a fire. This story seems a little unbelievable, maybe embellished a bit. Vuz does seem to be a flamboyant personality. Probably some embellishments make it sound better. Hopefully they'll make a movie or, book out of it at least. Get Denzel or somebody cool to be his character, right? Younger, get Michael B. Jordan so he can be young, virile. 3, my son expected warmth, food, housing, clothes, and stability. He could be certain that no matter which way my fortune turned, he would receive the most of things he desired. Stability, however, was not possible in my world. Consequently, it couldn't be possible in his. Now, see? That's what I mean. Pitiful. Now, all of us, if we are subject to the system of white supremacy racism, we would also fail to be parents. We've talked about that before. That's why it's attempted mother, attempted father, attempted parent. You really can't qualify to be a successful parent under the system of white supremacy because you just don't have control. White people can come smack you around, take your children. We've read about that over and over. Richard Williams, Minister Malcolm X, over and over and over. We read about that. We were once a family. Remember Devontae, California? Remember Devontae? So we've read about this over and over and over and over and over, like forever in the book club. All of that said, it is very different if you are doing your best and I'm trying to be a good parent and I lose my job, or we get evicted, or I'm in a car accident, or whatever, you know, and Minister Malcolm X, the Klan kills a parent. There are a lot of ways that racism, white supremacy can really obliterate your best effort at parenting. If you are just, you know, hey, I done found me an attractive fella and I think we're going to go shack up and move over here. Whoa, 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 whoa. This fella is looking pretty. I think I'm going to go shack. We're going to move. Yeah, yeah. What? Wait a minute. In fact, got me a job opportunity. I know we live in San Francisco, but this looks promising. And in fact, hang out with this dude that I used to be talking with for 2 weeks. I'm going to go over here to New York. I'm going to be back to pick you up later, and then we're going to move from California to New York. I get just hang tight. I'm going to be back, pick you up for a minute. I'm out drinking with white. I mean, what other term do you call that? That's what I'm saying. This is not quite bad parenting on a scale I'm doing my best and, you know, white people are just making it hard for me. This is just flitty. I mean, some of this, like, man, this is not even, I forgot to being out the party. We get to that later, but I mean, some of this is not even like, really? Like, this is the best parenting effort that we can have. I mean, this is a lot of how we still do it, you know. Got our boyfriends coming by. How many boyfriends has God met at this point? I lost count. Flitty. She says, oh, and I didn't even get our writer, VGQ. We got it again. Victims Guaranteed qualified. This seems contradictory and self-serving. She could provide greater stability if she decided to change her lifestyle. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like white people are imposing a lot of this instability on she and Guy. A lot of it is self-imposed. Flitty. You know, I'll hang out at the commune and pretend racism ain't so bad for a little while, and then we'll jet down to L.A., San Fran, move around New York, Africa. Like, come on, man, come on. 4, Thomas is an unexpectedly fast move, sat up straight. He looked at me, his face wise and hard. You got another nigger. He's African, ain't he? Then he's a nigger. Somebody has said that logic seems pretty solid. Anyway. Just like me, he's a nigger, and just like you, oh, Faye girl, and so is your goddamn holy Martin Luther King, another black-ass nigger. Ooh, he was vile. Ooh. Oh, Faye, defined as a white person resorting to name-calling, is a, boy, we do get on some name-calling. See there? See? We got so many ways of not white person. Oh, Faye. See, last week we got old Captain Charlie. We got lots of different ways. The man. You talking about a white person? Yes, white person. All of that. I would even need him to explain what is an au fait girl. Like, what exactly do you mean when you say that she's trying to be a white girl? What exactly? And break that down. All of it. When your boy to be a white boy, what do you mean exactly? And I know you picked out the using big words, like, okay, we write that down, you talk like a white boy, okay. What else exactly does he do? That then, even that's significant, because they got whole books called Acting White. This is in like 1960. For that to be said then is kind of, because the premise was that was kind of a new, well, it is after Brown v. Board of Education. That is a key principle of the book. Stuart Buck, Acting White, that did not become a concept or an insult until after school integration, Brown v. Board of Education. So this is post Brown. So I guess, fits to a degree. But still, that is really early on to already be at the point where it's sounding like if you are not a foul-mouthed hooligan, if you are articulate in any way, you are trying to be white, because it used to not be that way at all. Any hoodles. Niggers is niggers. I have said that before. Niggers is niggers. And the flittiness of this all, we're supposed to be married, and that quickly, never mind. And then you can't even be honest about, like, I could see how someone would be upset, all this, and just our whole approach to relationships is pitiful too. It's hand in hand in terms of why the parenting is pitiful, because the whole Negro package, that's why I said that stay black and proud is so raggedy and pitiful. Oof. There you go. There you go, right there. In the whole, this is how we just hop from one sexual arrangement to another, and 200 questions. What? 5 questions? What? We just fast forward to the marriage. Sometimes don't even talk to the other person. We just gonna get married. Did you talk to them about that? We're gonna get man. Pitiful. And to a large degree, this is still the way that we function in Area 8, sexual activity, and then sit around and wonder, man, why are relationships so bad? Why is Leroy Jr. so bad? You just like your grandfather. He was wild and crazy. Yes, because we behave in about the same way. Let's see. Number 5, my sedity friends who were talking about freedom and writing stupid books that nobody read, like this book we're reading here apparently, thinking I was white. What? Raising my son to use big words and act like a white boy. The white supremacists have convinced so many of us that being well-read, skillful writing is a negative attribute. May be the reason for some of the animosity directed towards Gus by other non-white victims. I don't know. They say I'm pretty ignorant. Most folks, they do not say you think that you are white on there using big words and all that and talking like you read the whole dictionary, being sedity. Like, they don't say that. They just say you're a no-count coon, and you say all white people are racist, and how dare you, you no-count coon. That's most of it. Number 6. Didn't get that far. Yep. We will be back. Pause right there. Rest of chapter 9. Email again, untiljustice@gmail.com. Number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let me see. I'll nab a few of my notes and then keep an eye out, see if folks have their own observations to share before we push off to audio segment number 2. Let's see. For chapter 8. Back up a little bit here. Back still in chapter 9. Okay. Chapter 8. Okay, so we meet Mr. McKay. They have the benefit performance. Sammy Davis Jr., Jewish. Let's see. Okay, bad parenting. Work took over my weekend. I saw a guy only during the few hours on Saturday when he came to the office to join other black and white young volunteers. Thomas was working a night shift, so I took a late night subway to Brooklyn and walked the quiet streets home. Guy's note on the dining room table informed me that he was at a party. Home at 12:30 a.m. 12:30 was absolutely the limit. After all, he was barely 15. I was strict, and he was usually agreeable. I would lie across my bed with a book and stay awake to make sure that he honored his note. Now, I don't have children, but wow. And I'm thinking of this in context. So at 13, Billie Holiday is singing Strange Fruit to him. And it's, oh my God, my ears, my virgin ears. You offended me, I'm going to bed. At 15, I'm a man and I'm running the streets of New York until 12:30 a.m. Like, I don't understand. I do not understand. Has there been that much of a spike in maturity from 13 to 15? Like, I don't have children, but I was 13. I was 15. I do not think my parents would have allowed me to run the streets, New York, even if it wasn't New York, even if we were a smaller town. I do not think they would have allowed me to run the streets until 12:30, even in the summertime. I don't think. I mean, what? What? Much less New York. Like, what? And we just read about the Savages last week. I thought he was being threatened by a gang of hoodlums, disrupt the funeral and everything. I thought we just read that. That is wild to me. Like, it's not even like he grew up in this area, so he knows all the nooks and crannies. And I've been living here since I was 5. And that's not the case. We just came out here. I don't know. Maybe, there's a different time period back then, I guess, maybe. I don't know. That does not seem safe or beneficial, especially given what last time. So she went out of town and left him there by himself. And then how he got involved with the Savages. The little girl came over, even all of that. Like, Jesus Christ. Are you serious? Anyway, yeah. Pitiful parenting. Pitiful. continue. So he does come home. Whoopee forgot. Let's see. So she meets Mackay, Oliver Tambo, who is also really important. They have a whole airport named after him in Africa. Now, that's why I said, like, this is kind of wild, like all the people that she met. So they're explaining the different organizations that they have on the continent. Again, Mr. Fuller has said the four-wallism does not work, and that seems to hold all over the world, because all they do is then sit around and say that these groups have been co-opted and they full of Uncle Toms like Gus T. They say the ANC is to the African National Congress is to the Pan-African Congress what the NAACP, National Association for Colored People, is to the black Muslims. Man, I have no idea how to process any of that. Like, what? Even if I just look at the U.S. part of it, the NAACP is to the black Muslims. Like, what? Like, what? Like, one of these is like a political group that's infiltrated by white people, and the other one is a religious group infiltrated by white people. I don't even know the comparison between the two. I mean, if they're talking about Elijah Muhammad's group, like, it's not even, one of these is a religious group infiltrated by white people. The other is a so-called political group infiltrated by white people. Four-wallism is not going to work, but I mean, what? I don't know what they mean in this comparison. Like, I couldn't even guess. Same thing now when I jump to the South African portion of it, and particularly because these groups change over time in terms of, sometimes people might say that they're radical, so-called, and then at other times people might say, oh man, these are, a bunch of coons and they're not doing it right and all the rest of it. So it kind of, would depend on what era you're talking about the ANC. Would depend on what era you're talking about the PAC. Anyway, words are important. Let's see. I fell out of my chair almost when I started reading for this week and seeing what we're going to be talking about. When we were reading Andrée Blouin's book, I told you all that the filmmaker for Soundtrack to Coup d'Etat, he said that more people are not familiar with Andrée Blouin's work because she's a female, and the sexism and patriarchal and no-count sexist, patriarchal, misogynistic black dudes like myself keep black females down, and that's why we don't know about her work. And I said, whatever, suspected racist. I think the reason that we don't know about this is usual suspects, race soldiers. And I said, how many of you all know who Didon Kamathi is? How many of you all know who Robert Sobukwe is? I mentioned him by name exactly. I think we even had Lauren who died and said, nope, I don't know nothing about no Robert Sobukwe. And then darn if we don't get to this book when he's mentioned exactly. How about that? And even with that, so dang, he's been mentioning the book, like, even, I guess, the teaspoon of people who did read this book, I guess it wasn't enough for them to read it, like, Robert Sobukwe, check him out. He has a whole book. How Can Man Die Better? You can go check that out. See, what did Robert Sobukwe have to say about racism, white supremacy? Really important. So if we can't say, well, you don't know who old Robert Sobukwe is because of sex, maybe say it's sexist because if you had read all of Dr. Angelou's autobiographies, you would have seen his name, and then you would have the wherewithal and ambition to go and see Mr. Sobukwe. Let me learn about your life and times. Yeah. Let's see. So she is all this. Mackay is the bestest, most loveliest black dude I've seen in the last 5 minutes. She said, we applauded the man and the cause that brought him to the United States. Then John introduced Mr. Mackay, and my love no longer was in the hands of Thomas Allen. Lord have mercy. That is, one more time, replace white supremacy with love. We do not have love, and we get all those white fairy tales and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and all the rest of it, and we just cut a fool. And even I have to add in, that's why I said last week when the person who wrote in, he said, hearing about Dr. Angelou when she was younger, and I had a question about that, and I said, what do you mean younger? Because she's in her 30s. during this time period that we're reading about. She's not a teen mom. She is not, in her early 20s or anything like that. In fact, she would qualify for Dr. Welsing's age limit, where she says we need to be over 30, 35 for dudes before having children. She would qualify at this point. She's over 30. She's in her 30s, close to mid-30s, in fact. That's what I mean. Like, this is not someone who you would just say, oh, she's young. She's immature. She's still in school. Let her graduate and get like, man, I mean, we don't qualify for men and women, but this is Maya in her 30s making these decisions. That's what I mean. And even the impulsiveness, and, I'm just so hot and bothered about all these dudes. I just can't even control myself. I think one of the listeners, he had said a few weeks back when she met John O'Killens and he had his wife and children, it seemed like she might have been contemplating being involved with him. Like, WTH, man, get your hormones under control. But again, that is generations of us, non-white people, where we get so wrapped up in Area 8 and hopping in bed and dating this person and do and all that ends up totally taking over precedent, as opposed to replace white supremacy with justice. Replace white supremacy with love. Then we can do it correctly. Let's see. And then look at so he's talking about all this and the differences between these groups and racism in South Africa. And she says, my first reaction was to wish I could be the white cloth in his dark hand touching his forehead, digging softly in the corners of his lips. Intelligence always had a pornographic influence on me. Like, what in the world? Now, I appreciate the honesty, but what in the world? And Fuller has talked about this and saying that we'll be at meetings, victims, to ostensibly to talk about racism, but that's not really what it's for. We come down, check out that number down there. That thing is delicious. Like to do a little counter racism with her. And it's been lots of that he said going on all through the years. He said, if you're going to go to the meeting, no, you don't go in the closet and get the tight-fitting dress and all that, and so you can leak your sexual impression. And no, this is business. Let's be about business. If it's about I'm looking for, attractive dude, well, then, they got other places for all that. But, I mean, if we're supposed to be talking about white supremacy racism, let's be on business. And, again, and she even said that in the book, we have not been serious about that. We've been shamming. We've been playing. We've been pretending. Even nigh on 2030, that is still the case. Just get the problem solved, man. Let's see. He talks about the Brown decision that I just mentioned, and talking about Dr. Angelou, while she's fawning over Mr. McKay, and the lips, so fat, man. Do you have a question? Do you think you can use nonviolence to solve this problem? And he's going to give the answer, and he says, witness your Supreme Court ruling of 1954. I mean, wow. Who told the truth? Time. So we stand 60 years removed. Schools are worse in terms of so-called segregation now than they were at the time of this decision. With all deliberate speed. I don't know if you knew that part or not, but I mean, that is not a decision or court case that I would point to like, yes, justice, the Negro triumph. No. She says, he, talking about McKay, was standing over me and I felt lucky, fortunate to be a black American. There it is. And in comparison to him and his people, only slightly impaired by racism. WTF. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. Slightly impaired. This is from a rape victim and everything else that she experienced. She couldn't even go to the dentist. I know why the cage birds sing. They basically lived on a slave plantation in Stamps, Arkansas. Man, victims guaranteed qualified. She says, after a shower, I settled in my bed with a book, a drink. I assumed that this was alcoholic because then she went to cigarettes. Like, if she had like a glass of water, I think she would have just said, I settled with a glass of water. If she had like a Sprite or a Coca-Cola, I think she would have just said a soda pop or something of that nature. I think this is an alcoholic beverage. I think we had folks who already commented there's a lot of alcoholic consumption throughout this book. Seems like everything is with liquor and cigarettes. And she said she was going to go to Paulie's party, but the specter of laughing black people shouting and arguing, that is us. It's not going to be constructive. It's going to be some shouting, laughing, arguing, a name calling probably. Like, that's why Fuller said, no hanging out, no parties. Let's just be on business. And that minimizes the likelihood of, let me get something nice and tight fitting, get my short skirt so I can go out here and, yes, we'll talk about counter racism. Please. Let's see. She said, and this is, so we go to the meeting. We're supposed to be listening to folks talk about racism and such. She says, I nodded and excused myself, saying I had to see Paulie. In fact, I had to get away from the man's electricity. Sparks seemed to be shooting from him to my nipples and my ears. My underarms tingled and my stomach contents fell to my groin. I had never fainted in my life, but at that moment I felt I was sinking into a warm, black, and friendly pool. What? Then she got the nerve to say, I know you supposed to be getting married. Paul said, you supposed to be getting married. What is going on? You out here acting a fool? She said, whoa. I was never flitty. I was never flitty. I won't no chicken shit floozy either. Like, what? We ain't got to get into the cursing and such, but really, you just... VGQ, bad parenting, and this for a large portion, not all of us, but for a large portion of non-white people, apparently both sides of the pond, both continents, this is still how we behave, where there is tremendous focus on Area 8, sexual activities, sexual impressions on other victims or even other white people, not solving the problem. Really, not even paying attention to all of the children that are produced from all this sexual activity. No focus at all. Just on to the next bedroom, on to the next penis, on to the next vagina. Pitiful. Flitty and pitiful. Let's see. She said she gave him a few sultry looks at the meeting. After he was done talking, raced downstairs, she hopped in the cab and justified the expense of a taxi ride to Brooklyn by telling herself, I was paying for my honor. What? I don't even, what? What are you talking, what are you talking about? Look, that word dignity has been coming up a lot too. I thought dignity could have been right there. Just paying for my Negro dignity. What are you talking, what? Don't you have a fiance? Like, what? Wackiness. There's the American Society for African Culture, CIA front. I wonder if Maya Angelou knows about this or writes about this at some point, because she's still writing through 67, so that would have to pop up if I saw that in the newspaper and there's any sort of organization and I attended some of their fairs or was involved in any way, and then I find out that this is backed by the CIA. Like, whoa, I'm gonna have to say something. Like, wait a minute, I've been confused. They got me again. Damn, and then the CIA too. Like, whoa. Let's see. So McKay, she says, I got a fiance and all that. And he says, I don't care. When you see your bloody fiance, tell him that I'm after you and that with every day is Saturday night and I'm black and I'm Dave. See, there we go. I said we got lots of Negro jargon and bad parenting. We got the double whammy because both right there. What does that mean? I'm black. Wait a minute, let me get over here. I'm after you. With me every day is Saturday night. Now, that right there, I think that might be one of those antiquated phrases, because I think back in the day, black people, it would be known Saturday night. Ooh-wee. I got to get my razor. I'm going to cut me somebody tonight. And generally, who you going to cut? I'm going to cut Leroy at the juke joint. Leroy is going to tap his foot. Leroy is going to cut a fool, and I'm going to cut Leroy at the juke joint tonight. And if Leroy ain't there, I'm going to cut Jamal, but one of you niggers, you fitting to get it. Step on my foot, look at me tough. Remember we read Bill Russell's memoir. He said his dad went to the juke joint in Louisiana and said, Nigger, are you tapping your foot to my quarter on the juke jukebox. You know, you put your cord in and play the song. He said, you tapping your foot to my nickel? I got to cut you. Ah! And they tear the whole club down. Come on. Come on. Every day is Saturday night. Now, we don't say that to white people. That's one of them Negro reserve phrases. I know we do not go up and tell no white person, look at here. Look at here, Bull Connor. Look at here, white men. Them white folks at the school, when they were messing over a guy, we don't go up there, look here, whitey. I don't know who you think you're dealing with, what type of Negro parents normally come up here, but hey, with me, every day is Saturday night. Mess around if you want to. I don't think it has the same effect with white. You can even add the rest of it and say, hey, whitey, I'm black, I'm dangerous. That's the ground. They already pulled the gun out. He said he's black and dangerous, so I started shooting, and you know, we put him down. Leroy say he's black and dangerous. I took his word for it. Come on. If this had been a white chick and McKay wanted to pursue her and she had a white man or a white boyfriend, would he have told her, you tell your white man I'm black and I'm dangerous? See that calendar? Every day on that calendar, Saturday to me. I'm black and dangerous all day long. What is he talking about? If you were that black and dangerous, we wouldn't be having you over here talking about no apartheid. They wouldn't have dropped you off in the desert if you were that. That's what you should have told them when they dropped you off in the desert. Hey, I'm black and dangerous. Who you think you putting your hands on? I'm black and dangerous. Please. With my black brother, he said, some of this don't sound believable. Yes. Tidbits of it do not sound, but you being black and dangerous, maybe to other black people, maybe. So then we go back. We're going to talk to Thomas. Say, I haven't lost nothing in Africa, and they haven't lost nothing in our country. That is very popular. More Negro jargon. They say that today, in fact. Especially some of the folks say that they're proud black Americans. They say that one today. Let's see. He said they can go back, as far as I'm concerned. They say that today, too. She says, so Thomas chose the same time to have more wedding presents delivered. Young, shabbily dressed men. Dang. Why are they shabbily dressed? I thought this was the era of privileged black males. She already told us we got the savages and just unworthy, uncouth Negro males. Shabbily dressed black dudes bringing, fencing, stolen property. What kind of existence is this for the Negro male in New York? On their way to Sing Sing, no doubt, where they'll be in shabby clothes for the duration of their existence. Let's see, chapter 9. Wells Restaurant, the Nigger Heaven, Delectable Negro. And then they said that the food had remained good. The menu still listed white items such as steak and lamb chops. That's eating high on the hog, as they say. But its main offerings, fried chicken, smoked pork, smothered pork chops, short ribs, and biscuits. And I said, now that's Negro food. That will get you all the... She ain't mentioned no vegetables. Not one vegetable. Not one vegetable. That is culinary height of Negro cuisine. Fried chicken. I said that before when Billie Holiday impugned her fried chicken. She said, look here, Billie, you don't come, you done been insolent and cursed my son. I mean, you're not going to tell me I don't know how to cook no fried chicken because you can go on and get out of here. Billie said, I'm sorry. I just don't like no raw chicken. I'm sorry. I behave. Like, fried chicken, like, come on, man. Come on. That's Negro fried chicken, smothered pork chops. That's the pig, short ribs, pig. And it's 3 meats. We got 3 meats and biscuits. Let's see. McKay was impressed with the guy's manliness. I don't even know what that means, but that's been such a big theme in the book. And then he said he walked through the South, McKay, and he made it to North Rhodesia. Reminded me of Michael Swango. This is way before he made it to Zimbabwe land, Rhodesia, as they say. Dr. Angelou gets upset when she says, well, I'm married Thomas, so we can't get down. He says, well, I'm, going overseas and I'm lonely, and they'll have, comfort white women when I get overseas to Europe and all the rest of it. And she says, I saw those delicate hands sliding over white women's bodies in their long, lank hair, but I couldn't imagine him kissing the white lips. Like, what? One, didn't you have a child with a white man? Greek, didn't you have a child with a white man? Didn't you have a child with a white man? Didn't you live in that commune with them white folks with your child? Come on, man. Come on. Like, come on, man. I'm going to be envious because you go with that. Come on, man. And you just met this dude. Come on. Let's see. And then she's rationalizing all this. She says, I'm brave. Abby had once told me I was too crazy to be afraid. Talking about Abby Lincoln. I'd be a fool to let McKay go to a bunch of whorish white women in Amsterdam. In fact, I might be betraying the entire struggle. What? I wouldn't do that. And then Guy who would have the chance to have an African father. What? What? He's 15. He's running the streets until midnight. And so now this dude from another continent is my father? What? See what I mean? It's just pitiful parenting all the way through. Pitiful. There could be no greater future for a black American boy than to have a strong, black, politically aware father. His being African would add an enriching spice. Even that, I said, delectable Negro. Are we baking a pie? Or are we talking about a stable, as stable as possible, safe household for your child? We haven't even done 200 questions with McKay. Like, come on, man. They go back to the restaurant and say, well, we're going to get married, and everybody applauds. She said that the folks like the happy story. I said, that is us exactly. We like lies, fairy tales. Oh, we're going to have the big wedding, and I'm going to do the dress and all that and go to Africa. Just all of this nonsense. Like, what have you thought? Oh, no, you didn't think all this out. This is just, that's sexual impression. He sure do look good. We should get married. He sure do look good. We should get married. He sure do look good. We should get married. Come on. Let's see. And then they have more alcoholic beverages. We've fallen in love. That word love is in this book. So that word love is in this book way more than the word racism. Way more. And then the entertainment, I can end there. So Guy last week, he is involved in world politics, and Castro, Nikita Khrushchev are here in New York, and I want to be there. I want to witness. This is a monumental event that I'll remember for the rest of my life. Totally true. This week, he said, Guy watched television. Thomas read the sports pages. She said Guy would be in his room laughing at I Love Lucy, and Thomas would be evaluating the chances of an athlete or national baseball team. Like, that is your privileged black male right there. Now, that's not all of us, but that is goo-ga. Like, you could just fast forward that to 2030, and Guy would be making sports bets for the NFL playoffs, the NBA regular season, the college football playoffs. You think Mike Swango and them Ohio State Buckeyes, you think they're going to do it? They putting their bets in. I'm getting ready to watch the game. And then he probably online watching the game, too. We watching Netflix, whatever. You can go on Netflix and watch I Love Lucy. It would be about the same. Watching screens, watching entertainment, have to beg them, can you please turn that off so we can eat dinner? No, we cannot watch the Netflix during dinner. Can you please turn that off so we can eat? Can you please turn that off? Can you please, we're not going to watch the game. Can we try and have you done your homework? At least turn it off till you do your homework. That would be the conversation today. And then they have the breakup. She's got another Negra, African Negra, and you act like a white girl. Went through all that. And then he's upset and says he could shoot this black female, which is probably true, the worthlessness of black life. But I mean, this right here, this whole scene of go through all these arrangements and sexual activity and just hop from relationship to relationship and get mad at the person. That was the Savages. The little girl, she was like 15 or 14 or whatever. She came over and said, well, hey, let me holler at you. And guy said, well, I already got someone. And she got mad and then went back and lied to her brother. And so now we got to kill you. Remember? And it stays at that stage forever. That's about the same thing that we almost had with Maya and Thomas and McKay. You want me to come back over there? You think that nigga gonna get bothered because I'm black and I'm dangerous? That's what I mean. Like, and that's about how we sound in 2030. Like, real talk. Black and I'm dangerous. You right. To other black, you right. You absolutely. That's why it's minimized contact, because black, dangerous to other black people. Black, dangerous to other black people. We will get to audio segment number 2. If you have additional commentary or what have you, do not wait until the last moment to get your hand up. And if you drop an email, untiljustice@gmail.com. This is the Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. The late, great Dr. Maya Angelou, The Heart of a Woman. Audio segment number 2.
Stanley and Jack Murray accepted my news without surprise. They said they had not expected me to stay. They felt that since I was an entertainer, I would leave the organization whenever I was offered a good nightclub contract or a part in a Broadway play. That's why they had brought in other dedicated workers to take over my job. I didn't bother to tell them how wrong they were. Grace Killens laughed at me. You met him last week at our house, didn't you? And this week you're going to marry him. The Wild West woman. She laughed and laughed. John took the news solemnly. Concern tightened his face and squeezed his voice into sharpness. He's serious about the struggle, but what else do we know? Are you going to be a second or third wife? How is he planning to look after you? Don't forget Guy. You're putting him under a strange man's roof, and he's almost a man himself. How does he feel about that? Because he was the most important, I had left Guy for the last. Vooz had said he wanted to be the first to talk to him, and I was happy to accept the much-vaunted masculine camaraderie. Let men talk to men. It was better for a woman, even a mother, to stand back, keep quiet, and let the men work out their mannish problems. Guy was spending the night with Chuck, and Abby and Max were performing, so Vooz and I were given the use of their apartment. He prepared an elaborate dinner of roast beef and sauteed vegetables and poured a delicious wine. I learned that night that he was an expert in extending pleasure. At the dining table, he spread before me the lights and shadows of Africa. Glories stood in thrilling array. Warrior queens in necklaces of blue and white beads led armies against marauding Europeans. Nubile girls danced in celebrations of the victories of Shaka, the Zulu king. The actual earth of Africa was black and strong like the girls back home and glinted with gold and diamonds. African men covered their betrothed with precious stones and specially woven cloth. He asked me to forgive the paucity of the gift he had for me and to understand that when we returned to Mother Africa, he would adorn me with riches the likes of which I had never imagined. When he led me into the darkened guest room and placed a string of beads around my neck, all my senses were tantalized. I would have found the prospect of a waterless month in the Sahara not only exciting, acceptable. The amber beads on my nut-brown skin caught ray. I looked into the mirror and saw exactly what I wanted to see, and more importantly what I wanted him to see, a young African virgin made beautiful for her chief. The next afternoon, I told Guy that the South African we had met at the Colentz's house was coming around for dinner. He took the news so casually I thought that perhaps he had forgotten who Make was. He went to his room and began playing records as I fumbled setting the table. When the doorbell rang, Guy popped out of the back room like a bottle cork and spun through the kitchen. I'll get it. Before I could set the stove burners to safe levels, I heard the rumble of voices speaking indistinguishable words. I reached the living room just as Vooz was beginning to lower himself into Guy's favorite chair. He stood again and we shook hands. I offered him the so much more comfortable sofa. Guy shook his head and smiled wanly. This is comfortable too, Mom. Since early childhood, Guy had made certain pieces of furniture his private property. In preschool years and until he was 8 or so, each night he would lasso chairs or tables with toy ropes before going to bed, and he would warn his horses to stay in the corral. Although he grew out of the fantasy, his sense of property possession remained and everyone respected it. Vooz sat down in Guy's chair, and I thought he was getting to a miserable start. Guy offered to bring drinks, and the second he left the room, Vooz said, "There is no reason to be nervous. We are both men. Guy will understand." I nodded. Vooz thought he understood, but I wondered how much of my son's temperament would really escape him. I sat primly on the sofa across the room. Guy walked in carrying a napkin-covered tray, ice, glasses, and a bottle of scotch. "Mom, something smells like it's sticking." He walked to Vooz. "How do you like your drink?" Vooz stood and mixed his own drink from the tray in Guy's hands. The two of them seemed absorbed in an atavistic ritual. I had ceased to be the center of attention. "Well, I'll go tend to the dinner." Vooz looked up over his drink. "Yes, Guy and I must talk." Guy nodded as if he already knew something. "Guy, will you please come to the kitchen for a moment?" He hesitated, reluctant to leave our guest. "Now, Mom?" "Yes, please." We stood beside the warm stove, and I opened my arms to embrace him. He stepped back, wary. "Please come. I just want to hug you." His eyes darted, and he looked young and defenseless. Unwilling, he walked into my embrace. "I love you. Please know that." I hadn't meant to whisper. He extricated himself and went to the door, his face suddenly sad and old. "You know, Mom, that sounds like goodbye." The sensuality between parents and children often is so intense that only the age-old control by society prevents the rise of sexuality. When a single parent is of the opposite sex, the situation is more strained. How to feel love and demonstrate affection without stirring in the young and innocent mind the idea of sexuality. Many parents, alarmed at the dreadful possibility of raising incestuous thoughts in their children's minds, withdraw, refusing all physical contact and leaving the children yearning and befuddled with ideas of unworthiness. Guy and I had spent years skating the thin ice. During his 12th summer, we attended a party in Beverly Hills. The children's party had been catered at one end of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and I drank margaritas with the adults at the pool's other end. That evening, when we returned to our house in Laurel Canyon, Guy startled me. "You know, Mom, everyone talks about Marilyn Monroe's body, but we were watching today and all the guys said you had a prettier shape than Marilyn Monroe." After he went to bed, I sat pondering my next move. He was old enough to masturbate. If I began to figure in his sexual fantasies, he would be scarred and I would have added one more weight to an already difficult life. That night, I went through my wardrobe, separating away the provocative dresses and choosing the staid outfits which were more motherly. The next day, I stopped at the Salvation Army with a large package and never again bought a form-fitting dress or a blouse with a plunging neckline. I continued preparing the prenuptial feast, assuring myself that Guy would take the news calmly. When I set the dining table, I consciously deadened my ears and hummed a song out loud. I was getting a husband, and a part of that gift was having someone to share responsibilities and guilt. They came to the table, and I saw from Guy's face that Vooz had not told him of our marriage plans. We sat to dinner, and I ate straw. The conversation swirled around me, making no contact. Soccer was as violent a sport as American football. Sugar Ray Robinson was a gentleman, but Ezra Charles was of the people. Malcolm X had the right ideas, but Martin Luther King was using tactics which had only been effective in India. Africa was the real old world, and America was aptly described by George Bernard Shaw, who said that it was the only country which had gone from barbarism to decadence without once passing through civilization. Guy was relaxed and entered into the exchange with his own young wit. They made each other laugh, and my stomach churned. I gathered the dishes, and when Guy rose to help clear the table, Vooz stopped him. "No, Guy, I must speak to you about our future, and I shall speak now. May we go into your room?" A shadow of panic rushed into Guy's eye. He turned to me, peering, quickly trying to scan my thoughts. In a second, he collected himself. "Of course. Please, come this way." He led the big man into his bedroom. After they entered, the door slammed. I made a clatter of dishes and a rattle of pans, slamming them together and jingling the flatware into cacophonous harmonies, trying to drown out my own thoughts and any sounds which might slide under Guy's door and slither across the kitchen floor and float up to my ears. Suppose Guy rejected the man and our plans. He could refuse. Because the white world demonstrated in every possible way that he, a black boy, had to live within the murdering boundaries of racial restrictions, I had raised him to believe that he had a say in the living of his life, and that barring accidents, he should have a say in the dying of his death. And now, so armed, he was able to shape not only his future, but mine as well. The kitchen was clean, every glass dried, and the dishes put away. I sat with a cup of coffee at the kitchen table, controlling the opposing urges to walk without knocking into Guy's room or grab my purse and haul out the front door, running to Ray's and a triple scotch on the rocks. Laughter from behind the door brought me back to reality. Guy had accepted V.U.S., which meant I was as good as married and on my way to live in Africa. They emerged from the room, broad grins stretched their faces. Guy's high yellow color was reddened with excitement and V.U.S. looked satisfied. "Congratulations, Mom." This time Guy opened his arms, offering me safe sanctuary. "I hope this will make you very happy." I stood in Guy's arms and V.U.S. laughed. "Now you'll have two strong men to take care of. We three will be the only invaders Mother Africa will willingly take to her breast." That evening filled with laughter and plans. When V.U.S. left for Manhattan, Guy spoke candidly. "You would never have been happy with Mr. Allen." "How do you know?" "I know." "Yes, but how?" "Because he's a bail bondsman." "No, because he didn't love you." "And Mr. Make does?" "He respects you." "And maybe for an African, that's better than love." "You know a lot, huh?" I didn't try to conceal my pride. "Yeah, I'm a man." The next few days glittered as friends, recovered from shock at my hasty decision, strung out a Mardi Gras of parties. Rosa threw a Caribbean fete where her African, Black American, and white liberal friends argued and laughed over plates of her famous rice and beans. Connie and Sam Sutton, an unpretentious intellectual couple, invited academic colleagues to a quiet dinner, which in time turned into a boisterous gathering. All over New York City, strangers hugged me, patted my cheeks, and praised my courage. Old friends told me I was crazy while struggling to control their admiration and envy. At the end of the string of parties, V.U.S. and I left for England, leaving Guy in the home of Pete and T. Beveridge, who lived a few blocks from my Brooklyn house. We sat on the plane holding hands, kissing, seeing our future as a realm of struggle and eternal victory. V.U.S. said we would marry in Oxford, such a pretty little town. I explained that I wanted to have my mother and son present at my wedding and asked if we could wait. He patted my cheek and said, "Of course. In London, we will say we married in America. When we return to New York, we will say we married in England. We will have our wedding according to your wishes and whenever you say, 'I am marrying you this minute.' Will you say yes?" I said yes. Then we are married. We never mentioned the word marriage again. Chapter 10. London air was damp, its stone buildings old and gray. Colorfully dressed African women on the streets reminded me of tropical birds appearing suddenly in a forest of black trees. V.U.S. and I moved into a one-room apartment which the Pack kept near Finsbury Park. For the first few days, I was happy to stay in bed after V.U.S. left for the conference. I rested, and gloated over how well fortune was finally treating me. I had a brilliant and satisfying man, and I was living the high life in London, a mighty long way from Harlem or San Francisco's Fillmore district. Evenings, V.U.S. entertained me with a concert of stories. His musical accent, his persuasive hands, and the musk of his aftershave lotion hypnotized me into believing I lived beside the Nile and its waters sang my evensong. I stood with Massey shepherds in the Ngorongoro crater, shooing lions away from my sheep with a wave of an elephant hair whisk. Morning lovemaking and evening recitals lost none of their magic, but the time between the two events began to lengthen. When I told Vuz that I was not used to having so much time on my hands, he said he would arrange for me to meet some of the other wives of freedom fighters attending the conference. Mrs. Oliver Tambo, the wife of the head of the African National Congress, invited me to lunch. The house in Maida Vale was neat and bright, but the sensation of impermanence in the large rooms was so strong that even the cut flowers might have been rented. She welcomed me and the other guests cordially, but with only a part of her attention. I didn't know then that all wives of freedom fighters lived their lives on the edge of screaming desperation. As we sat down at the table, the telephone rang, constantly interrupting the conversation we were trying to establish. Mrs. Tambo would lower one side of her head and listen, and most often allow the rings to wear themselves to silence. A few times she got up, and I could hear the one-sided sound of a telephone conversation. Lunch was slow-cooked beef and a STI cornmeal porridge called mealie. She told me that she had gone to the trouble of preparing South African traditional food so that I would not be shocked when I met it again. I didn't tell her that in the United States we ate the same thing and called it baked short ribs and cornmeal mush. A startlingly beautiful woman spoke to me. Her skin was blue-black and smooth as glass. She had brushed her hair severely, and it lay in tiny ripples back from a clean, shining forehead. Her long eyes were lifted above high cheekbones, and her lips formed themselves in a large black bow. When she smiled, displaying white even upper teeth but bare lower gums, I knew she was from Kenya. I had read that the women of that country's Luo tribe had their bottom for teeth extracted to enhance their beauty. She was bright and tough, describing Europe's evil presence in Africa. Mrs. Okalala from Uganda, a squat tugboat of a woman, said she found it ironic, if not downright stupid, to hold a meeting where people discuss how to get colonialism's foot over the neck of Africa in the capital of colonialism. It reminded her of an African saying, "Only a fool asks a leopard to look after a lamb." Two Somali women wrapped in owing pink robes smiled and ate daintily. They spoke no English and had attended the lunch for form's sake. Occasionally, they whispered to each other in their own language and smiled. Ruth Thompson, a West Indian journalist, led the conversation as soon as lunch was finished. What are we here for? Why are African women sitting eating, trying to act cute while African men are discussing serious questions and African children are starving? Have we come to London just to convenience our husbands? Have we been brought here only as portable pussy? I was the only person shocked by the language, so I kept my reaction private. The Luo woman laughed. "Sister, you have asked completely my question. We in Kenya are women, not just wombs. We have shown during Momo that we have ideas as well as babies." Mrs. Okalala agreed and added, "At home we geek. Some women have died in the struggle." A tall, wiry lawyer from Sierra Leone stood. "In all of Africa, women have suffered." She picked at the cloth of her dress, caught it, and dragged it above her knees. "I have been jailed and beaten. Look, my sisters. Because I would not tell the whereabouts of my friends, they also shot me." She wore a garter belt, and the white elastic straps on her left leg evenly divided a deep gouged scar as slick and black as wet pavement. Because I fought against imperialism. We gathered around her, clucking sympathy, gingerly touching the tight skin. "They shot me and said my fighting days were over, but if I am paralyzed and can only lift my eyelids, I will stare the white oppressors out of Africa." The spirit of overcoming was familiar to me also. In my Arkansas church, we sang, "I've seen starlight, you've seen starlightly, this body downy will lay down in my grave and stretch out my arms." 19th century slaves who wrote the song believed that they would have freedom, and that not only would souls cross over Jordan to march into glory with the other saints, but the grave itself would be unable to restrict the movement of their bodies. When the lawyer dropped the hem of her dress, all the women wrapped her round with arms, bodies, and soft voices. "Sister, Mother Africa is proud of you, a true daughter of a true mother." The Somali women had also touched the scar. They spoke unintelligible words of sorrow and stroked the Sierra Leonean woman's back and shoulders. Mrs. Tambo brought out a large bottle of beer. "This is all there is in the house." The lawyer took the bottle with both hands and raised it to the sky. The mother will understand. She turned and handed the beer to Mrs. Okalala. Auntie, as the elder, you must do the honor. I followed the general movement and found myself with the women bunched together in the center of the small living room. The woman faced us solemnly. To talk to God, I must speak Lingala. Except for the Somali women and me, all the women nodded. She began to speak quietly, near a moan. Her tempo and volume increased into a certain chant. She walked around in rhythm and dribbled beer in the four corners of the room. The women watching accompanied her in their languages, urging her on, and she complied. The Somali women's voices were united into the vocal encouragement. I added amens and hallelujahs, knowing that despite the distances represented and the babble-like sound of languages, we were all calling on God to move and move right now. Stop the bloodshed. Feed the children. Free the imprisoned and uplift the downtrodden. I told about Black American organizations, remembering the Daughter Elks and Eastern Stars, Daughters of Isis and the Pythians. Secret female organizations with strict moral codes. All the women in my family were or had been members. My mother and grandmothers had been daughter rulers and high potentates. Oaths were taken and lifelong promises made to uphold the tenets and stand by each sister even unto death. The African women responded with tales of queens and princesses, young girls and market women who outwitted the British or French or Boers. I countered with the history of Harriet Tubman, called Moses, a physically small woman slave, and how she escaped. How she stood on free ground above a free sky, hundreds of miles from the chains and lashes of slavery, and said, I must go back. With the help of God, I will bring others to freedom. And how, although suffering brain damage from a slaver's blow, she walked back and forth through the lands of bondage time after time and brought hundreds of her people to freedom. The African women sat enraptured as I spoke of Sojourner Truth. I related the story of the 6-foot-tall ex-slave speaking at an equal rights meeting of white women in the 1800s. That evening, a group of white men in the hall, already incensed that their own women were protesting sexism, were livid when a black woman rose to speak. One of the town's male leaders shouted from the audience, I see the stature of the person speaking and remark the ferocious gestures. I hear the lowness and timbre of the speaker's voice. Gentlemen, I am not convinced that we are being addressed by a woman. Indeed, before I will condone further speech by that person, I must insist that some of the white ladies take the speaker into the inner chamber and examine her, and then I will forbear to listen. The other men yelled agreement, but the white women refused to be a party to such humiliation. Sojourner Truth, however, from the stage took the situation in hand. In a booming voice, which reached the farthest row in the large hall, she said, Yoked like an ox, I have plowed your land. And ain't I a woman? With axes and hatchets, I have cut your forests, and ain't I a woman? I gave birth to 13 children, and you have sold them away from me to be the property of strangers and to labor in strange lands. Ain't I a woman? I have suckled your babes at this breast. Here she put her large hands on her bodice. Grabbing the cloth she pulled. The threads gave way, the blouse and her undergarments parted, and her huge tits hung pendulously free. She continued, her face unchanging and her voice never faltering. And ain't I a woman? When I finished the story, my hands tugging at the buttons of my blouse, the African women stood applauding, stamping their feet, and crying, proud of their sister whom they had not known 100 years before. We agreed to meet often during the conference and share our stories so that when we returned to our native lands, we could take back more than descriptions of white skins, paved streets, flushing toilets, tall buildings, and ice-cold rain. A year would pass before I actually went to Africa, but that afternoon in Oliver Tambo's English apartment, I was in Africa surrounded by her gods and in league with her daughters. The conference ended and Vuz had to go to Cairo on PAC business. He took me to London's Heathrow Airport and handed me a pile of English pounds. Find a good apartment in Manhattan and furnish it well. It must be large and central. I was unhappy at the prospect of going back to New York alone, but he assured me that he would return in 2 weeks or at most a month. After he concluded his business in Egypt, he might have to go to Kenya. The thought of his exotic destinations cheered my spirit and strengthened my resolve. I was happy to return to New York and the task of finding an apartment which would meet his exquisite taste. In 1 week, I found an apartment in Manhattan on Central Park West, packed books, and hired a mover. On our moving day, Guy and I sat among the boxes in the Brooklyn living room. He wanted me to tell him about London again. I described the speakers talking in the rain at Hyde Park Corner and the solemn guards at Buckingham Palace, but he wanted to hear about the Africans. Tell me how they looked. How did they walk? What were they called? The names were beautiful. There was Kazangwizi and Makwane, Malatsi, Mahomo. Guy sat quietly. I knew he was running the sounds through his mind. After a moment, he said, "You know, Mom, I've been thinking of changing my name. What do you think?" What I thought was that my marriage to Vuz had affected him deeply, but I said nothing. Johnson is a slave name. It was the name of some white man who owned my great-great-grandfather. Am I right? I nodded and felt ashamed. Have you chosen a name? He smiled. Not yet, but I'm thinking about it. All the time. Guy spent the next few weeks adjusting to his new school, and I used my time seeing my friends and trying to beautify the apartment. The Harlem Writers Guild members and Abby listened attentively to my description of Africans in London. They nodded, appreciating the freedom fighters' dedication. They smiled at me, proud that I had been so close to the motherland. Before Vuz's return, I painted the kitchen and put brightly colored wallpaper in the bathroom. The apartment was crisp and elegant. Vuz came home like a soldier returning from a conquered battlefield. His sagas of Cairo were heroic. He had drunk coffee with President Nasser and talked privately with his assistant. Egyptian officials supported the African struggle for freedom, and soon he would take Guy and me to live in Cairo. Excitement shook away Guy's just-forming adult postures. He jumped up, wiggling. "We're going to Egypt. I'll see the pyramids. Boy, I'm going to be riding camels and everything." Vuz chuckled, happy to be the cause of such elation. Guy finally took his thrills to bed, and I rushed into Vuz's waiting arms. The next morning, my interior decorating met with stony disapproval. The old sofa was wrong for a man in my husband's position, and the second-hand store bedroom set definitely had to go. I am an African. Even a man sleeping in the bush will lay fresh leaves on the ground. I will not sleep on a bed other men have used. I didn't ask him what he did in hotels. Certainly, he didn't call the manager and say, "I want a brand new mattress. I am an African." I said, "But if we're going to Egypt, we shouldn't buy new furniture." He answered, "The things we buy will be of such quality they will have a high resale value. And anyway, we're not moving immediately." I followed him meekly around a furniture store where he selected an expensive bed, a teak coffee table, and a giant brown leather sofa. He paid in cash, pulling bills from a large roll of money. The source of Vuz's money was a mystery. He evaded my questions with the agility of an impala. There was nothing for me to do but relax and accept that he knew what he was doing. My son and I were in his care, and he looked after us well. He was an attentive father, making solo visits to Guy's school and sitting with him late evenings over textbooks. They laughed often and affectionately together. When other Africans visited, Vuz would insist that Guy sit in on the unending debates over violence and nonviolence, the role of religion in Africa, the place and the strength of women in the struggle. I tried to overhear their interesting conversations, but generally I was too busy with household chores to take the time. It seemed to me that I washed, scrubbed, mopped, dusted, and waxed thoroughly every other day. Vuz was particular. He checked on my progress. Sometimes he would pull the sofa away from the wall to see if possibly I had missed a layer of dust. If he found his suspicions confirmed, his response could wither me. He would drop his eyes and shake his head, his face saddened with disappointment. I wiped down the walls because dirty fingerprints could spoil his day, and ironed his starched shirts. He had his shoes polished professionally. Each meal at home was a culinary creation. chicken Kiev and feijoada, eggs Benedict, and turkey tetrazzini. A good woman put iron sheets on the bed and matched the toilet paper to the color of the bathroom tile. I was unemployed, but I had never worked so hard in all my life.
All righty. Katherine Massey Book Club, context of white supremacy. We ended last sentence. I was unemployed, but I had never worked so hard in all my life. And we'll pick up there. Next week, we're kind of at the end of, kind of at the end of chapter 10, a tidbit more next week. And dare I even say, a teaspoon of privileged black male sexism, patriarchy, misogyny. Perhaps, that might even be the first teaspoon that we've had in 2 consecutive memoirs where this point has been raised, maybe, finally. Folks have commentary. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Don't wait till the last minute if you have commentary questions to add. Go back to the email now that we got to the rest of chapter 10. Let's see. We didn't even get to all of chapter 9. All right, so back to chapter 9, number 6, page 138. Atavistic, and this is where she's talking about the alleged attraction between mother and parent. Atavistic definition relating to or characterized by reversion to something ancient or ancestral. Atavistic. Ancestral? Is that black culture, being attracted to your black mom if you're a boy? 7, 139. The sensuality between parents and children often is so intense that only the age-old control by society prevents the rise of sexuality. When a single parent is of the opposite sex, the situation is more strained. How to feel love and demonstrate affection without stirring in the young and innocent mind the idea of sexuality. Victims guaranteed qualified. I am a parent, but I have not had such feelings. This may be projection of her own insecurities and history of sexual abuse during childhood. I don't know. And that is a good point to remember. We are talking about someone who was raped as a child, so that certainly would impact you moving forward and maybe your ideas, thoughts around sexuality. But yeah, I can see, if anything, it would be maybe let me reconsider having all these dudes hanging around my son, that I'm dating this fella now, and then next week it's a different fella, and then next week it's a different fella. Like, maybe that would be the one to calm down in case one of these dudes is some sort of child rapist or anything else. Like, let me calm that down. Like, yeah, I don't know. Number 8. George Bernard Shaw, who said that it was the only country which had gone from barbarism to decadence without once passing through civilization. Everything about this statement seems incorrect and only promotes confusion. Again, it's slogans, and I've seen that exact phrase talking about Europe, the only country which had gone from barbarism to decadence without once passing through civilization. I've seen that quote on like T-shirts where black people will wear like, ooh, that's ooh. I don't know what that means. Same thing. All I got to do is stay black and die. I don't know what that means. Hey, with me, every day is Saturday night. I'm black. I'm dangerous. I don't know what that means. I know what dangerous part is, but I mean, what? Every day is Thursday, isn't it? I thought it was the 16th. What? What are you talking about, man? Which is often what I say around non-white people victims of racism. And I mean, that was rampant. They didn't have no Neely Fuller Jr. I don't think you're going to hear. Maya Angelou is 1 year older than Neely Fuller Jr. 1 year old. And 1 year older than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'd kind of forgotten about all that when she's meeting him and all that. She is 1 year older than he. He, Fuller, born in 1929. Maya Angelou, born in 1928. Man, all of that was rampant during that time period, and I think the lack of codified counter-racist language is on display throughout the 1960s, and a massive deficit of that time period, and even now. Chapter 10. Mrs. Oliver Tambo, the wife of the head of the African National Congress, ANC, invited me to lunch. Oliver Tambo, South African anti-apartheid activist, president of the ANC from 1967 to 1991. He was born in 1917, died in 1993. His wife, Adelaide Francis, born in 1929, same year as Fuller, died in 2007. Both were exiled from South Africa in 1960, same time period we're talking about. Number 2. The Mau Maus, 1952 to 1960, Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya against British colonialism. I mentioned Robert Sobukwe. The other name I mentioned was, how many of you all know who Dedan Kimathi is? Mau Mau. That would be another one. You can research. They got whole books about him as well. Mau Mau, I think that should have came up in Obama book. Had to go, but I know that's not in the audio book that's redacted, but that should be in the book. I mean, it should be a passing mention of the Mau Maus in Kenya, and we don't want to replay that. I'm Obama. I'm going to the White House. Forget all that Mau Mau. He continues, the origin of the term is unclear, but may have been coined by suspected racists as a pejorative term and does not have an African origin per se. The term was also used to describe President Obama since his father was from Kenya. Now, I do remember that. We got the Mau Mau and the White. I do remember that. Then it was for sure pejorative and racist when white people were using it then, although he never said he was Mau Mau or Kenyan or any of that. Trump might have even called him a Mau Mau if I were about to go back and look. You see, number 3. Miss Tombo brought out a large bottle of beer. Last call for alcohol. They don't have no last call here. Apparently, hey, even if the stewardess don't bring out no liquor, I got my satchel right here. I got, unless you're going to be all sedity and demand ice cubes, we going to knock back 3-4 shots right now. Sobriety would be best. Number 4. I told Black American organizations, remembering the Daughter Elks and Eastern Stars, Daughters of Isis, and the Pythians, I think that's how she said it, secret female organizations with strict moral codes. All the women in my family were or had been members. Can there be secret non-white organizations in a global system of racism, white supremacy? That is a great question. I don't know how secret the Mau Maus were. That is a great question, and especially now they got drones and all the rest of it. So I don't know. And the book again, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, Racial Matters, the FBI's secret file on Black America from 1960 to 1972. And I told you that organization, the American Society for African Culture, or whatever it was, African American Culture, however they phrased it, CIA front organization. I said you could take some of that money that they got hundreds of thousands of dollars to splash around in the 1960s, take some of that money and buy 2 or 3 non-white people victims. Keep me up to date. Just give me the notes, you know. Matter of fact, take this here, record. I got an iPhone 3. Take this in there with you and record all the meetings. Bring me back the recording. Isn't that cool? You behave right and might get you an iPhone. Maybe. You behave right. You could do that with some of that money you got. Number 5. Sojourn Truth. I related the story of the 6-foot-tall ex-slave speaking at an equal rights meeting of white women in the 1800s. Town's male leader shouted from the audience, "I'm not convinced, but we are being addressed by a woman." I'm not convinced that we are being addressed by a woman. The white women refuse to be a party to such humiliation, and ain't I a woman? Question. I did not know this full story of Sojourner Truth. No, we do not qualify as men or women. Reading is more important than watching television. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Yes, infamous moment, pulling out her breast and all the rest of it. I'm sure there's more detail to it. It's hard for me to imagine white women being that empathetic. Like, no, we're not going to join in this. We're with our black sister. Like, what? Anyway, reading more important than watching television. Here. 6. We did not get that far. We'll pause. We'll pick up there. I said we didn't finish chapter 10. We'll pick up for the rest of that next week. Email untiljustice@gmail.com. Let's see. And the number 605-313-5164. The code 564943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Alrighty. back to chapter 9. I'll get in some of my notes, keep an eye out, see if folks have their own thoughts, and we'll wrap up for this portion of the text. Take wagers to see how long before Dr. Angelou finds a different cute black fella to be interested in, and then it'll be deuces to Mackay as well. Let's see. Back up here. The great Abby Lincoln. Okay, chapter 9. So Mackay meets Guy, impressed with his manliness, whatever that means. That again, I wish if man, even I had to pause. So we got Guy like literally every other page. I'm a man. I'm a man. I don't need no babysitter. I'm a man. I'm a man. Don't be surprised. I'm a man. So he's been saying that the whole book, except for when Billie Holiday is singing about strange fruit. That's the only time. I'm not a man. I'm an offended child. Other than that, I'm a man. Then we're in a book that is called The Heart of a Woman. I said, damn, we kind of got the both sides of it the whole way through. I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man. Woman, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man. Woman, I'm a man, I'm a man. No, on both accounts. No, we do not qualify. As evidenced by this book. But I wish manliness had been defined. Let's see. Chapter 9, let's see. They watched television. Break up with Thomas. So they're going to break the news to Guy that they're going to be a couple. It seemed like Guy was serving drinks. She said, I sat primarily on the sofa across the room. Guy walked in carrying a napkin-covered tray, ice, glasses, and a bottle of scotch. Like, is a 15-year-old supposed to be serving drinks? Now, I know Alec Murdoch and, for white culture, yes, they said if Guy's age, he should have his own tumbler. He should have his own autographed shot glass and, come in here and get you some scotch, drink like, put some hair on your chest. You say you're a man. Hey, you're a man. We put some hair on your chest. Yeah, that sort of thing. But, I mean, dang, he's serving at 15? Yeah, it's the same thing I said now. You can serve drinks at 15. But Billie Holiday at 13 singing strange phrases. Oh, I'm a minor. What are you doing? It's supposed to be G-rated. What's going on here? It does not compute for me. You got all this sensuality, which he's talked about before. I do not remember wigging out like, oh my gosh, I have the biggest crush on my mom. And I don't remember any other of the black boys that I knew talking about, man, my mom is just the cutest thing ever. And I got the hots from my mom. I mean, I just do not remember that. Even if, thought my mom is good looking. I want to get me a cute young thing that reminds me of my mom. That I have heard. Not, I'm trying to get my mom, get my dad up out of here. Woohoo! No, I don't. No. That is very unusual other than Oedipus and white culture. Let's see. She said during his 12th summer, talking about Guy, we attended a birthday party in Beverly Hills. They got the smoke out there now. The children's party had been catered at one end of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and I drank margaritas liquored at the birthday party for the children and the adults at the pool's other end. The evening we returned to our house in Laurel Canyon, Guy startled me. Mom, everyone talks about Marilyn Monroe's body, but we were watching today, and all the guys said you had a prettier shape than Marilyn Monroe. Now, that is a fascinating scene for a lot of reasons. One, I'd even be curious. So is this seen in more detail in either autobiography number 2 or 3, the books before that we're reading book number 4? Is this a scene that's more detailed? Like when the fella said, why was Guy sleeping with a butcher knife in camp? What happened there? It might be more detail about that scene in the book autobiography 2 and or 3. Either way, just because of the news that I've been watching the past week in LA, and because I was just in Beverly Hills, I know they don't have no whole lot of niggers in Beverly Hills, and I know for darn tootin' they didn't have no whole lot of niggers who owned property with an Olympic-sized swimming pool to throw a party for some nigger children. So I know this had to be a lot of white people. So this might have been a bunch of little white dudes. And so at this time, we'd be rebonding. What is this? He'd be 12. This would have been a year. Oh, man, put that in context. So a year before Billie Holiday comes to talk to him at 13 about the lynchings, he's with these little white boys. And, look at that. His mama got that old wriggly, curvy shape. I don't like that better than old Marilyn Monroe. At 12? That's these little white boys talking about his. Man, come on. Come on. My response to that is not, my son might be getting the hots from his man. These little white race soldiers, gosh, we are not coming back out here for no more of this. Now, maybe these were black children. I don't know. Nat King Cole or whoever, maybe. I don't think so, given what I've known about their experience in L.A. Robert Pershing Foster, he didn't tell us nothing about having no swimming pool in L.A. We read about him in The Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson. I don't remember nothing about that. I remember black people in L.A. catching a tough time. Some of the black people out in the Palisades right now, it's because they wouldn't let us get no property in Beverly Hills. We had to come out here, deal with these Santa Ana winds. But I would be very curious to know a teaspoon more about this birthday party out in Beverly Hills where they were drinking margaritas. Sobriety would be best. I'd be interested to see Laurel Canyon too. Where is that? Is that been gentrified? Is that close to the fires? Laurel Canyon in SoCal. Let's see. So they go to talk. Guy. I mean, at this point, if I'm Guy, everything that you've been left, across the continent with some dude that she's broke up with. We're not even dating anymore. She'd have left me with this dude. She's out running in New York or wherever in the world. And then you come back here. She leaves you by yourself. And she's ripping and running over here. And then she come back. I'm marrying Thomas. Oh, wait a minute. I'm marrying this dude. Oh, wait a minute. This dude is from Africa or someplace. I'm marrying him. Oh, wait a minute. It's just got to be like, whatever, man. Whatever. Are we switching schools? When are we leaving? Yeah, it's going to be fine. I'm a man. I got it. I'm be going to school. And I don't even know what you could even say at this point. Like, given just what we've read, in the first 150 pages or so. Man, love your parents, respect your parents. But wow, all this parade of all this. Let's see. He said, I stood in Guy's arms and Vu's laughed. Now you'll have two strong men to take care of you. We three will be the only invaders Mother Africa will willingly take into her breast. All this, rhetoric, empty rhetoric. And again, even the big rhetoric, men. Ain't no men in this house. Let's see. I'm a man. He said he respects you. Talk about Vu. And maybe for an African, that's better than love. I don't know. You know a lot, huh? I didn't try to conceal my pride. Yeah, I'm a man. They could have named this the title of the book, Heart of a Woman, and then ... I'm a man for Guy. Heart of a Woman, and I'm a man. P.S. Guy is a man. There we go. Heart of a Woman, P.S. Guy is a man. Let's see. Chapter 10. That's what I said. We finally got a teaspoon of sexism, misogyny, patriarchy, the black females, Oliver Tambo's wife, and what have you. So what are we here for? Ruth Thompson, West Indian journalist, led the conversation. Said, why are African women sitting, eating, trying to act cute, while African men are discussing serious questions and African children are starving? Have we come to London just for convenience of our husbands? Have we been brought here only as portable pussy? Wow. Wow. Cutting right to the chase. Listen, now we got teaspoon of the sexism, misogyny. Oh, man, we're not even doing serious things. We just backseat, literally backseat for the sexual activity. Now, we didn't hear this interestingly with Andrée Blouin. She was working. She was not on, no, they just send me around to do cute things and where like I am doing all kinds of organization, females, males, everybody. I don't guess Maya Angelou bumped into Andrée Blouin in her section, but dang, I don't know, maybe Andrée Blouin could have met up with them, told them y'all need to switch it up, come to the meeting, switch it up, and we could be doing things. Y'all could be organizing over there and fundraising and all kinds of goodies. speaking with journalists, all kinds of good things. Talking to expatriates from the U.S., black people from all over the world, lots of things that can be done. We got lots of work to do. Let's get to it. Let's see. They bring up the Mau Maus. Already talked about them. Didon Kamathi et al. Lots of books written on the Mau Maus. Miss Tombo brought out a large bottle of beer. Everybody's got beer and liquor, scotch, all kinds of drink. Again, 1 drink per week. Anything over 1 is carcinogenic. They didn't know this at the time. Let's see. Then my Angelou is recounting historical events, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman, who's still not on that $20 bill yet, been all that time, but recounting all these efforts in black females, specifically their contributions to replacing white supremacy with justice. That's even interesting that at this point she didn't mention Rosa Parks. Like, that's kind of recent one, right? Get that in there. She didn't even get up off the bus, and contemporary right there with us now. Let's see. Got that with Sojourner Truth, Yoke Like an Ox, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Oh, and then they go off to find a good apartment. Okay. And we'll pick up to wrap up chapter 10 for next week. But yeah, the parenting has been a big, like, man, the parenting and the jargon. Yeah, we'll have to we'll have to chat it up and I guess pay attention. We still have about a good half of a little less than half of the text to go, but I mean, wow. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to say. And again, to a large degree, a lot of these parenting patterns are still the same. I can only, emphasize that Fuller, others have said, once you have that child, they're going to be classified as black. All that dating, and if I'm a male looking for a cute female, I'm a female looking for a handsome dude, all that is done. The top priority is that child, period. The top priority is that child, not dragging every lame dude or female around. This is my new friend. Meet my child. No. That just adding to the problems and making things worse. Prioritize taking care of that child. If they're 14, 15, they are not a man. They are not a woman. They should not be treated as such. And that is not, now I got license to resume my dating activities. I'm going to warm my Tinder account. I'm like, come on, man. Come on. We have seen what this sort of parenting produces, and the product is not cute. Anywho, we'll be here mañana, neutralizing workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then compensatory call-in on Saturday. Reading, more important than watching television, sobriety would be, I think this book more so than any other than I can think of, at least immediately, drinking. I'm a man, we got to get me some sexual activity, and then drinking. Like they're just drinking all the time. Sobriety would be best. Dry January, are we still not dry January? Dry January. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring, no name calling black people, because we had some of that this week. Even name called Dr. King, man. Which there was a lot of that. I can't even act like that's the first time I heard. There was a lot of name calling of Dr. King and everybody.
Our favorite pastime, man. Why would Dr. King get a pass? We name call everybody. Shut up, you coon. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.